Chapter 1360. Sanyuan City. Hello Zhuowen. I was at the scene of the battle at Sky Capital Peak 4 months ago. You're really strong. Su Ronghua, on the other hand, appeared natural and unrestrained. She extended her delicate and white jade-like hand and placed it in front of Zhuowen. Zhuowen was taken aback. He extended his hand and shook her hand gently. He smiled and said, "That's because of the uniqueness of my armor. My strength is only average." Su Ronghua's strength was not bad. Her cultivation was at the 6th level Emperor realm. Judging from her aura, she was not far from the 7th level Emperor realm. She was only a core disciple of Sky Capital Peak. It seemed that the gap between Mysterious Origin Peak and Sky Capital Peak was quite big. During the process of shaking hands, Zhuowen also sized up the 20 core disciples behind Su Ronghua. He found that they were all 4th level emperors, with a few 5th level emperors. Su Ronghua shook her head. She obviously did not believe Zhuowen's words. However, she was a smart person. She knew that this involved Zhuowen's privacy. Naturally, she would not continue to ask. "Alright, you can go now. For this investigation, you will listen to Zhuowen's orders. Do you understand?" Elder Tiandu suddenly said solemnly. Yes. Su Ronghua and the 20 or so core disciples all nodded in agreement. This is a high-grade emperor weapon, the Red Cloud Flying Sword. It's extremely fast. Ride this flying sword, and you will reach the border of the Divine Spectre realm in 3 days. Your target this time is Sanyuan City. You will investigate the truth behind the destruction of the neighboring Yinhua City. Elder Tiandu waved his sleeve and took out a scarlet flying sword. The flying sword hummed and expanded to a size of several hundred feet. It was more than enough to carry 20 people on it. "Zhuowen, take this jade talisman. I've left a mark on it. If you encounter any trouble in Sanyuan City, crush the jade talisman, and I will rush over immediately." Xiaoyu took out a jade talisman from his sleeve and handed it to Zhuowen. After receiving the jade talisman, Zhuowen looked at Xiaoyu with slight surprise and nodded with a smile. "Looks like you still care about your disciple. Since you're so sincere, I won't be polite and accept it. You brat, what nonsense are you saying?" Xiaoyu's eyes widened in anger. His tone became a little unfriendly. "I'm leaving, old Xiaoyu. I appreciate your kindness. Goodbye." With that, Zhuowen stepped Red Cloud Flying Sword. The Red Cloud Flying Sword turned. Red light turned. And Red Cloud Flying Sword turned. Red Cloud Flying Sword. The Red Cloud Flying Sword turned. Red Cloud Flying Sword turned. Red Cloud. Red Cloud. The Scarlet Heaven Flying Sword's speed was indeed fast. It was even faster than Zhuowen's purple lightning wings. Of course, if Zhuowen used the power of the void on his purple lightning wings, his speed would increase by several times. Perhaps the Scarlet Heaven Flying Sword under his feet would not be able to compare. Just as Old Man Tiandu had said, Zhuowen's group only took 3 days to arrive at 3 Origin City. However, when the Red Cloud Flying Sword landed in 3 Origin City, everyone was stunned. They realized that the city, which was supposed to be bustling with activity, was completely silent. There wasn't a single soul in 3 Origin City. It was like a dead city. Is 3 Origin City always like this? Zhuowen turned around and asked Su Ronghua, as he looked down at the deathly silent 3 Elements City. Su Ronghua shook his head and said, "Although 3 Origin City is a relatively remote city in the Divine Nether Realm, it's not to the extent that there isn't a single soul here. Could it be that the tragedy in Yinhua City has already spread to 3 Origin City?" "It's very likely." Zhuowen's eyes were cautious. Soon after, he commanded the Red Cloud Flying Sword to land in the center of 3 Origin City. 20 people got off the flying sword and looked around vigilantly. Zhuowen's brows slightly knitted. His powerful mental energy was like invisible tentacles as it spread out in all directions to investigate the situation in the surrounding buildings. However, what made Zhuowen's brows tighten even more was that there wasn't a single soul in the surrounding buildings. Even the things in the buildings were untouched. There weren't any signs of fighting or anything else. It was as if everyone in 3 Origin City had evaporated into thin air. "Zhuowen, should we split up and search around 3 Origin City?" Su Ronghua's brows tightly knitted together as she asked Zhuowen. "Yes, All of you split up and search. However, be careful. If there's anything amiss, immediately use the communication jade token to summon us. Zhuowen nodded his head and said. As she spoke, Su Ronghua began to assign tasks. It had to be said that Su Ronghua was extremely capable. She also had some methods to dispatch other core disciples. From the respectful attitude of those disciples towards Su Ronghua, it was clear that Su Ronghua was highly respected in their eyes. If Zhuowen was the one to dispatch them, those disciples might not necessarily listen to him. Zhuowen. After assigning tasks, 20 over disciples flew towards the surroundings and began to search the entire Three Origin City. Su Ronghua stayed behind and stayed beside Zhuowen. Zhuowen, can you see anything different? Su Ronghua softly asked. Zhuowen shook his head and said, I can't see anything either. If we want to understand what happened here, we need to find the original residents of Three Origin City. Otherwise, we won't be able to find anything or any clues from this ghost town. A short while later, over 20 core disciples gathered on the street where Zhuowen and Su Ronghua were located from other parts of Three Yuan City. However, what disappointed Zhuowen and Su Ronghua was that the 20 over core disciples were unable to find any useful clues in other parts of Three Origin City. In fact, they couldn't even find a single living person. Su Ronghua's beautiful eyes revealed a worried look as she asked, What exactly happened? Why has Three Origin City become a ghost town? Su Ronghua, do you know the address of Yinhua City? Zhuowen suddenly asked. Su Ronghua was taken aback. Soon after, he subconsciously replied, I know. Then follow me to Yinhua City. The rest of you will stay in Three Origin City and wait for our return. Zhuowen instructed before controlling the scarlet firmament flying sword to carry him and Su Ronghua. They transformed into a fiery red arc of light and disappeared from the sky above Three Origin City. Yinhua City was very close to Three Origin City. Zhuowen only spent 2 hours to reach Yinhua City. The feeling that Yinhua City gave him was even more deathly still and empty than Three Origin City. In fact, Zhuowen could even faintly sense that the air in Yinhua City was filled with a strange fog that was filled with the aura of death. Yinhua City is also a ghost town. Tiandu Peak Master said that Yinhua City was massacred, and no one survived. Su Ronghua softly sighed. Massacred? Senior Tiandu is so sure that Yinhua City was massacred? Zhuowen asked in astonishment. That is also Peak Master's guess. He thinks that the probability of a massacre is the highest. Su Ronghua replied. Are there any other cities nearby? Zhuowen continued to ask. Su Ronghua took out a scroll from his spirit ring and flipped it open. There are a total of 5 cities in this border region. Aside from Yinhua City and Three Origin City, there are 3 other cities, namely Renjia City, Yanliang City and Dumao City. Then let's take a look at these 3 cities. Zhuowen didn't waste any time. With a wave of his hand, he directly stepped onto the flying sword with Su Ronghua and flew towards the other 3 cities. The 2 of them spent 6 hours patrolling the 3 cities. However, what made the 2 of them gloomy was that the 3 cities were also ghost towns like Three Origin City and Yinhua City. There wasn't a single person in them, and they were filled with a deathly stillness. The 5 cities at the border have all been massacred? Who exactly is it that is capable of massacring nearly 1 million people in 5 cities in such a short period of time? Moreover, no one is alive or dead. Stopping at the last city, Dumao City, Zhuowen and Su Ronghua looked at each other. Their brows furrowed tighter and tighter as the doubts in their hearts grew deeper and deeper. Who exactly was it that massacred these 5 cities? Moreover, it was so cleanly massacred. Zhuowen, let's return to Three Origin City first. This border region is very strange. I'm afraid that we need to return to the Inner Academy and report this matter to Peak Master. Su Ronghua said to Zhuowen. All right, let's return to the Inner Academy first. Zhuowen didn't have any objections. With a wave of his sleeve, the scarlet firmament flying sword once again flew out and headed towards Three Origin City. Approximately 6 to 8 hours later, they landed in Three Origin City. At this moment, the sky had become dusky and the surroundings were incomparably white and pitch black. In the empty ghost town, not a single light was lit, and it looked extremely desolate. Swoosh! The scarlet firmament flying sword landed in 3 Origin City. Soon after, Su Ronghua took out her communication jade talisman and informed the 20 overcore disciples that were previously in the city. Oh, no response. After sending out the message, Su Ronghua's brows slightly knitted together as she said in astonishment. What's wrong? Zhuowen asked. Just now, I used the communication jade talisman to inform the other senior and junior brothers. However, I discovered that no one responded. Logically speaking, if they are all in 3 Origin City, they will definitely reply to my message. Su Ronghua's brows tightly knitted together as she said. Perhaps they saw that we haven't returned for a long time and went out to look for us. Why don't we stay in 3 Origin City for a night? Perhaps they will return tomorrow. At that time, we can return to the inner academy together. Zhuowen suggested. Su Ronghua sighed softly. Her beautiful eyes were filled with worry as she said, Looks like this is the only way. The inn is right in front. There must be many rooms inside. Let's just go in and stay for a night. Zhuowen pointed to the front. There was a rather exquisite little loft there. Outside the loft, there was a bamboo pole with a canvas hanging on it. The word inn was written on the canvas. After entering the inn, it was pitch black inside. With a flick of his finger, Zhuowen took out a luminous pearl from his spiritual ring. This luminous pearl might be a rare treasure in the secular world. However, to a cultivator, it was merely a worldly item that was used for illumination. Everything in this inn is neat and tidy. However, there is not a single person. I really wonder what happened earlier. Su Ronghua looked around the inn and sighed softly. Chapter 1361. Evil Cultivator. The room in the inn was rather large, and the decorations inside were extremely simple. There was a bed, a table, a stool, and a half-lit oil lamp on the table. Apart from these, there was nothing else. The window opposite the door was wide open, and a cool breeze blew in from the window, bringing a bone-piercing chill. Zhuowen opened the other rooms one by one, and after discovering that there was nothing unusual, he said to Su Ronghua downstairs, Miss Su, come up and choose a room. Su Ronghua gently nodded and chose the room next to Zhuowen's. I will set up a defensive yuan array in your room, just in case. After Su Ronghua chose her room, Zhuowen took out a few yuan crystals from his spirit ring and arranged them in a strange pattern in the room. An invisible ripple rose from the surface of the room. Many thanks, Su Ronghua said with a sweet smile. It's nothing. I always feel that the 5 small cities at the border are very strange. It's always better to be prepared. Rest early tonight, and see if the others have returned tomorrow. Zhuowen said with a faint smile. Su Ronghua nodded and closed the door. Zhuowen looked around the pitch-black environment of the inn and frowned. Ever since he entered 3 Elements City, he had a feeling that he was being spied on. This feeling was inexplicable. Is it just my imagination? Zhuowen shook his head and entered his own room. After setting up a similar defensive yuan array, he sat cross-legged on his bed and began to meditate and train. Xiao Hei, the ice and fire energy produced by the ice-fire sacred symbol was different at every stage. For example, the combination of the human rank cold energy and fire energy produced a spherical ice fire. The combination of the earth rank cold energy and fire energy produced a lotus-shaped ice fire lotus. Will the combination of the heaven rank cold energy and fire energy be different? After sitting cross-legged on the bed, Zhuowen communicated with Xiao Hei and asked, It should be different. However, I'm afraid that you will only know what form it will take after you combine the dark cold poison and the 9 flames karmic flame. Xiao Hei replied in an indifferent manner, after which she fell into silence and continued. Brat, this 3 yuan city gives me a very strange feeling. I keep having the feeling that something strange will happen inside. You should be careful and be on your guard. Upon hearing this, Zhuowen's heart shivered. Soon after, he nodded his head seriously. Since even Xiao Hei had said so, it was likely that 3 Yuan City was definitely not a good place. Speaking of which, after discovering that something was wrong, Zhuowen should have immediately returned to the inner court. However, the more than 20 core disciples of the Sky Capital Peak had mysteriously disappeared. It would be difficult for him to explain to old man Tiandu. If we can't find them tomorrow, we can only report back to the inner court. Staying here is not a solution. Zhuowen's eyes flickered. Just as he finished speaking, he realized that his eyelids were a little heavy, and a strong sense of sleepiness rose in his heart. Why are you so sleepy? Could it be that he was too tired during the day? That's not right. When Zhuowen's eyelids drooped, and he was about to fall asleep, he suddenly opened his eyes. His gaze revealed an extremely cautious expression. At his level of cultivation, it was easy for him to keep his mind clear. Even if he didn't eat or drink for several years, nothing would happen to him. But now, after just a day of running around, he felt tired. This was definitely not normal. Zhuowen, you're awake. A clear voice suddenly sounded out. Soon after, Zhuowen followed the voice and coincidentally saw Su Ronghua leaning against the door, smiling at him. Miss Su, why did you enter my room? Didn't you just enter the room next door to rest? Zhuowen's brows slightly knitted as he asked in astonishment. Su Ronghua chuckled and said, Zhuowen, it's already early in the morning. You overslept yourself. I specially came over this morning to wake you up. Early in the morning? Zhuowen was taken aback. Soon after, he noticed that the window on his right just so happened to sprinkle in a warm golden sunlight, appearing rather glaring. However, Zhuowen's brows quickly knitted together. He had clearly only closed his eyes for a moment. Could it be that he had already fallen asleep when he closed his eyes? Moreover, he was drowsy. In the end, it was Su Ronghua who woke him up. Follow me first. The others have already returned and are waiting downstairs. Moreover, they have brought good news. Su Ronghua gave a lovely laugh as she walked out of Zhuowen's room and headed downstairs. With a doubtful heart, Zhuowen followed behind Su Ronghua and walked down the stairs step by step. Soon after, he saw over 20 people gathered outside the inn. They were the 20 over Sky Capital Peak core disciples that had previously disappeared from 3 Yuan City. Senior Sister Su, Senior Brother Zhua. A young man wearing dark green clothes with a peaceful expression immediately arrived in front of the two. His attitude was rather respectful and submissive. Qinzhe, tell me, where exactly did you go yesterday? Why did you only return this morning? Su Ronghua somewhat reprimanded. Qinzhe's eyes revealed an apologetic look as he said, Senior Sister Su, I am truly sorry. I acted on my own initiative at the beginning. As he spoke, Qinzhe tirelessly recounted the events that had occurred yesterday in full detail. It turned out that after Zhuowen and Su Ronghua had left for Misty Delight City, the group of 20 over people had become bored and began to stroll around 3 Yuan City. When they arrived at the southeast corner of 3 Yuan City, there was an alley. Originally, the alley was very normal. However, Qinzhe's eyes were rather sharp. Within the alley, he actually saw a bare arm within a pile of trash. Soon after, the group entered the alley and rummaged through the pile of trash. Immediately, they pulled out the owner of the arm. It was an extremely skinny boy. When the boy saw Qinzhe and the rest, he was just like a frightened mouse as he repeatedly shrieked, his eyes filled with terror. Later on, they tried to calm the boy's emotions and finally made him lower his guard against them. That boy was one of the original residents of 3 Yuan City. When Qinzhe asked the boy what had happened in 3 Yuan City, the boy finally suppressed the fear in his heart and recounted everything that had happened in 3 Yuan City. What exactly happened in 3 Yuan City? Zhuowen immediately asked with interest. Qinzhe's gaze turned grave as he said, according to the boy, the reason why 3 Yuan City has become a ghost town is because of a terrifying evil cultivator. That evil cultivator wants to increase his own strength, so he needs to sacrifice living people in order to obtain the corresponding strength. Moreover, it is said that the evil cultivator is proficient in using poison. Before he entered 3 Yuan City, he quietly released a kind of knockout drug, causing all the humans in 3 Yuan City to faint. Even the high and mighty Emperor Realm cultivators in the city did not faint under the effects of the knockout drug. However, they lost the ability to resist and were all captured by the evil cultivator. Zhuowen frowned slightly as he said, then everyone in the city was sacrificed by the evil cultivator? That is indeed the case. This is also the reason why 3 Yuan City has become a ghost town. Qinze said solemnly. To be able to make Emperor Realm cultivators lose the ability to resist, is there such a strong knockout drug in the world? Zhuowen frowned slightly as he asked curiously. Su Ronghua smiled and said, after all, he is an evil cultivator. His methods are naturally different from ordinary cultivators, especially this kind of evil cultivator, who is proficient in using poison. The poisons on his body can be said to be strange and unusual. Then, does the boy know the whereabouts of the evil cultivator? Zhuowen asked. Qinze shook his head and said, the boy does not know. However, we have tracing bees on us. The boy's blood also has the smell of the knockout drug. I have already used tracing bees to record the smell. Yesterday, we followed the tracing bees to the evil cultivator's location. Therefore, we left 3 Yuan City and only returned this morning. You found the evil cultivator's location? Also, did you have a conflict with the evil cultivator? Su Ronghua asked anxiously. Qinze shook his head and said with a bitter smile, we do not dare to face the evil cultivator. After all, the evil cultivator is an existence that has destroyed the entire city. There are also mid-level Emperor Realm cultivators in 3 Yuan City. If they can destroy 3 Yuan City, the few of us will not be enough. You did the right thing. Fortunately, you did not act rashly. Otherwise, you might not have been able to return. Su Ronghua nodded slightly. Then, her beautiful eyes fell on Zhuowen and said, Zhuowen, why don't we follow Qinze to the evil cultivator's location and wait for an opportunity to strike? I believe that with the 2 of us, we will have more than 20 mid-level Emperor Realm cultivators. We are confident that we can take down the evil cultivator when he least expects it. Hearing this, Zhuowen frowned slightly. He felt that something was wrong. However, Su Ronghua was right. Since they had found the evil cultivator's location, they could not let him go. After all, the evil cultivator would leave after digesting the countless cultivators' sacrifices in 3 Yuan City. If they continued to look for him, it would be like looking for a needle in a haystack. Let's go and take a look first. Zhuowen nodded in agreement, and then the group walked out of 3 Yuan City in a grandiose manner. The evil cultivator's location that Qinze mentioned was quite far from 3 Yuan City. In order not to alert the evil cultivator, the group did not dare to fly in the sky. Therefore they spent a lot of time. About 6 hours later, Qinze and the rest stopped in front of a mountain range. He said softly, at the back of this mountain range, there is a rather inconspicuous cave. Back then, the tracing bee was roaming around the entrance of the cave. Therefore, I guess that the evil cultivator is inside the cave. Since the evil cultivator is proficient in using poison, he must have set up similar traps in the cave. Everyone take this detoxification origin crystal. This origin crystal has a certain level of poison resistance. Carry it with you, and you will be immune to all poisons. Zhuowen took out more than 20 transparent origin crystals from his spirit ring and handed them to Su Ronghua, Qinze, and the rest of the group. Then, under his instructions, they silently crept into the back of the mountain range. As expected, they found a cave. Chapter 1362. Illusion, let's go in together. Su Ronghua said to Zhuowen. There are too many of us. If we go in, we will easily expose ourselves. Why don't I go in alone to check things out? Zhuowen said, shaking his head. Su Ronghua and the rest looked at each other before nodding their heads. Zhuowen's words were not without reason. There were too many of them. If they entered the cave together, they would definitely alert the enemy. After discussing with Su Ronghua for a while, Zhuowen climbed up the cave like an agile monkey. Soon after, he discovered that the interior of the cave was pitch black. However, if one were to take a closer look, one would see that there was a pale green glow within the pitch black cave. His eyes flashing, Zhuowen entered the cave like a cat, restraining the aura in his body to the extreme. The tunnel in the cave was very deep. During the process of entering, Zhuowen discovered several traps. If not for his powerful mental energy, he might have really fallen for them. They are really cautious. I wonder how powerful this evil cultivator is. After avoiding a trap, Zhuowen frowned slightly. He continued to advance. He could sense that the cave was nearing the end, so he slowed down. At the end of the cave there was a corner. A dense pale green glow was emitted from behind the corner. It was strange and terrifying. Ah! A miserable shriek sounded from the corner. It was like a ghost wailing and a wolf howling, as if a malicious spirit was demanding a life. Moreover, the miserable shriek was continuous, sounding distant and long, causing one's hair to stand on end. Zhuowen's eyes narrowed. He approached the corner step by step, becoming more and more vigilant. Finally, he walked out of the corner. This was a rather large stone hall. The surrounding rock walls were full of potholes. At the center of the stone hall stood a large square cauldron. This square cauldron was made of bronze. The enormous cauldron emitted a blazing pale green glow. Miserable shrieks were emitted from this square cauldron, as if countless creatures were trapped within. Under the square cauldron, a dark green flame burned. As soon as Zhuowen entered the stone hall, he felt a wave of high temperature hit him in the face, as if he was in a furnace. On both sides of the square cauldron stood 2 crosses that were about 10 feet tall. On each of the crosses stood a figure. Both of them were middle-aged men with strong builds. Their auras were powerful and vigorous. Zhuowen concluded that they were both mid-level great emperors. However, at this moment, the auras on their bodies were extremely weak. They were like candles in the wind, about to be extinguished at any moment. Perhaps because they heard the footsteps, one of them raised his head with great difficulty. His swollen eyes stared at Zhuowen, and he was stunned. Soon after, he revealed an expression of wild joy. Save me. This person's dry lips weakly spat out these words. After he finished speaking, he was completely powerless. However, his face was filled with hope. Zhuowen narrowed his eyes and pointed with his right hand. 2 air blades appeared in the air, and the shackles on the 2 were immediately released. Plop! Once the shackles on their bodies were released, the 2 immediately fell to the ground. They could only rely on their hands to slowly wriggle on the ground. Zhuowen walked towards one of them, and placed his right palm on his shoulder. A vigorous wave of star energy flowed into the person's body. The person's pale face became much rosier. Tell me what's going on. What is in this square cauldron? Zhuowen stared at the middle-aged man in front of him, and asked cautiously. The middle-aged man looked at the square cauldron beside him. His eyes were filled with fear. He trembled and said, Quick, take me away. Otherwise I will die. I will die just like everyone else in 3 Origin City. Take me away, quick. The middle-aged man looked extremely agitated. His hands tightly grasped Zhuowen's sleeves as his body trembled. Zhuowen frowned and snorted. A wave of energy gushed out and shook off the middle-aged man's hands. He said coldly, Tell me, what is this square cauldron? Otherwise, I will let you experience a true death. Feeling the coldness in Zhuowen's eyes, the middle-aged man came back to his senses. He calmed down and said, I will tell you. You must take me away from here. I do not want to stay in this damned place for a moment longer. Of course, Zhuowen said indifferently. This is the temporary cultivation ground of the evil cultivator. This square cauldron is the evil cultivator's emperor weapon. Inside the square cauldron are the souls of all living beings in 3 Origin City. The evil cultivator intends to refine these souls into evil pills to increase his cultivation. At this point, the middle-aged man's body trembled again. It was a sign of fear. Zhuowen's pupils shrank. This evil cultivator was truly audacious, vicious and merciless. The entire 3 Elements city had a population of nearly 1 million, and he had actually stripped the souls of such a terrifying number of people to refine evil pills. It was truly against the will of the heavens. Why didn't the evil cultivator put the 2 of you into the square cauldron to refine evil pills? Both of you are rank 4 Emperor realm. You should be the top experts in 3 Origin City. Zhuowen narrowed his eyes. He seemed to have thought of something. He stared coldly at the middle-aged man, and his voice became cold. Because the middle-aged man had just spoken when he was interrupted by an evil voice. Because these 2 fellows are the main ingredients of the evil pills. Naturally, they have to be put in at the last step to refine the pills. Zhuowen's eyes narrowed. He suddenly raised his head, and saw a slender figure standing on top of the square cauldron. It was an old man in his middle years. He wore a dark green robe, and his skin was extremely thin. It was covered with layers of wrinkles like the bark of an old tree. Moreover, the old man's eyes were green. They did not look like the eyes of a human. They looked more like the eyes of a ghost. It's him. It's the evil cultivator. The middle-aged man kept retreating. His eyes were filled with fear as he looked at the evil cultivator. Brat, which power are you from? How dare you investigate me? The evil cultivator stared at Zhuan and sneered. Zhuan said indifferently, I'm an inner yard disciple. You dare to do whatever you want in the divine specter realm. You have guts. Inner yard? I see. Since you're an inner yard disciple, I can't let you go. Let's become a part of the evil pill of the square cauldron. The evil cultivator licked his lips and roared. He swooped down. Wisps of green poisonous gas surged out of his body and instantly filled the entire stone hall. Zhuan stretched out his right hand and took out the tiger head clear golden spear. He only had one high-grade emperor artifact on him now. The other high-grade emperor artifact had been taken away by the demonic avatar. After all, the slaughtering demonic blade was a demonic weapon. It could only unleash its strongest power in the hands of the demonic cultivator's demonic avatar. In the hands of Zhuan, it would be limited. Ding! The crisp sound of metal clashing resounded. Then Zhuan felt a huge force. Sparks flew out from the tip of the tiger head clear golden spear. Dang! 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 Zhuan and the evil cultivator both took a few steps back. Their gazes became more cautious. Dang! 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 After the two separated, the sound of continuous footsteps could be heard from the corridor outside the stone hall. Then Su Ronghua and more than 20 people all came to the stone hall. Zhuan, is he an evil cultivator? Su Ronghua looked at the old evil cultivator in front of him. His gaze was cautious as he asked Zhuan. Yes, he's. Zhuan nodded. Before he could finish his words, a gust of wind swept from behind him and heavily smashed into his back. Pucci! Zhuan spat out a mouthful of blood and staggered a few steps forward. Just as he stabilized his body, a gust of wind whistled towards him. Slightly raising his head, the evil cultivator appeared in front of him with a sinister smile. His palms, which were covered in poisonous gas, blasted towards him. Zhuan was caught off guard. He only had time to raise his hands and block in front of him. Boom! A muffled sound rang out as Zhuan continuously retreated. His hands and body were covered in a green gas. The poison released by the evil cultivator was very strong. Even though Zhuan had the detoxification origin crystal on him, he was still poisoned. Why? Zhuan retreated to the corner and stared at Su Ronghua. His eyes were filled with doubt, confusion, and many other emotions. Just now, Su Ronghua was standing behind him. When he was unprepared, Su Ronghua used all his strength to launch a sneak attack on him. Su Ronghua was a sixth heaven emperor. Naturally, Zhuan was not feeling well after taking a full blow from a martial artist of such a cultivation level. In addition, the evil cultivator's poison had left Zhuan powerless. He could not use much of his strength. Haha, well done. The evil cultivator laughed. His pale green eyes were filled with excitement. Then he walked over step by step. Oh no! My strength is being suppressed by the poison. I can't use my strength at all. Zhuan's expression was extremely ugly. He secretly circulated his qi, but found that he could not use any of his strength at all. It's useless. My 7 wounds stride powder is the king of poisons. Even a high-level great emperor martial artist would be weakened by this poison, let alone a mid-level great emperor like you. As he spoke, the evil cultivator approached Zhuan. His right hand, which was covered in green gas, slowly approached Zhuan's forehead. It's over. A feeling of despair rose in Zhuan's mind. Zhuan, what are you doing? Hurry up and wake up. Suddenly, an exasperated voice rang out in Zhuan's mind. Then Zhuan's eyes flew open. He saw a bloody face in front of him. The face's eyes were bloodshot. Its hair was disheveled, and its mouth was wide open. It was pouncing towards Zhuan. What's that? Zhuan's eyes narrowed. His mental power surged out, forming a mental barrier that blocked the face outside. However, the ghostly face continued to howl outside the barrier, its sharp claws constantly pounding on the barrier. These When he came to, Zhuowen realized that he was still in the room of the inn. However, this room was filled with countless ghostly faces. These ghostly faces fearlessly pounced on Zhuowen's bed. Xiao He and Cheng Huang stood in front of Zhuowen, blocking the terrifying number of ghostly faces. Chapter 1363. Thousand Ghost Een Gathering Formation. Brat, you're finally awake. Hurry up and release the 9 flames of karma. These ghosts are most afraid of powerful flame energy like heavenly fire. Xiao He, who was working with Cheng Huang to stop the countless ghosts, also noticed that Zhuowen had woken up. She could not help but shout at him. Although Zhuowen was extremely puzzled, now was clearly not the time to be in a daze. Hence, he did not hesitate to use the 9 flames of karma. 9 colored flames continuously erupted, as a terrifyingly high temperature spread. Yeah. The ghost that had escaped the mental energy barrier, and was continuously howling and beating at it directly melted under the high temperature of the 9 flames of karma. It screamed miserably, and was finally annihilated. Subsequently, Zhuowen waved his right hand, and the 9 flames of karma spread out. The entire room turned into a sea of fire. However, Zhuowen's control of the flames had reached the pinnacle, and he did not set anything in the room on fire. The cries of ghosts and howls of wolves continued to resound. Instantly, all the ghosts in the entire room were annihilated by the 9 flames karmic fire. The remaining ghosts all fled toward the wide open windows. Their miserable cries were sometimes far and sometimes near. A miserable scream suddenly rang out from the room next door, causing Zhuowen's pupils to shrink. He muttered, "Oh no!" and immediately rushed out of the room and rushed towards the room next door. The moment Zhuowen opened the door, his hair stood on end as he discovered that there were countless human heads floating outside the inn. Their hair was disheveled, their faces were dripping with blood, and their eyes were empty and colorless. Perhaps because they had discovered that Zhuowen had opened the door, these human heads howled and rushed towards Zhuowen. Die! Zhuowen let out a cold snort as the karmic fire of 9 flames surrounded his body. When the heads that were flying towards him got close to the karmic fire of 9 flames around his body, hissing sounds could be heard as they were all annihilated. Damn it, what exactly are these things? Zhuowen's expression was ugly as he stepped into the room where Su Ronghua was. He threw out a palm and directly smashed through the door. Then he saw Su Ronghua lying on the bed. Her body was covered with many ghosts that were absorbing the yang energy from her body. Su Ronghua's eyes were tightly shut. Her body was covered in cold sweat as she muttered incoherently. If one listened carefully, it was as if she was speaking incoherently, and no one knew what she was saying. Scram! Zhuowen coldly snorted as the 9 flames of karma burst forth. Immediately, the ghosts attached to Su Ronghua were annihilated by the 9 flames of karma. At the same time, the 9 flames of karma, the karma, of karma, and karma and the karma and karma, and the karma and the karma. Countless ghosts were karma, karma, and karma and karma, karma and karma and karma. At this moment, Su Ronghua's face was extremely pale. His eyes were tightly shut, and he was still speaking incoherently. It was as if he was having an extremely terrifying nightmare. It seems that this woman is the same as you. She has also fallen into an illusion. Blackie sighed softly. Karma? So what I saw just now was all fake. Zhuowen was stunned, and then he turned his head to look outside the window. He noticed that the sky outside the window was still pitch black, and it wasn't dawn at all. It looked like Xiao He was right, and everything he'd seen and heard earlier was probably an illusion. Why did I fall into an illusion? And the ghosts outside the room, could they be the remains of the dead creatures in 3 Origin City? Zhuowen frowned. He had many questions. What exactly happened in 3 Origin City? Could it really be the work of an evil cultivator? Zhuowen muttered softly, as he recalled what he had experienced in the illusion. There is 1,000 Ghost Een gathering array in this city. I did not notice it when you first entered. When you fell into the illusion, and the ghosts appeared, I guessed it. Xiao Hei's voice was extremely solemn. 1,000 Ghost Een gathering array? What kind of array is this? Zhuowen had an ominous feeling. Xiao He sighed and said, the 1,000 Ghost Een gathering array is actually an evil array that can refine the flesh and blood of living creatures. The flesh and blood of living creatures who die in this array will be turned into energy for the array, while their souls will become ghosts and kill other living creatures in the array. It also has an extremely strong hallucinogenic effect. I'm afraid that someone has set up such an array in 3 Origin City in advance, and used this method to kill all the living creatures in the city. I'm afraid that all the living creatures in this city have become the nourishment for the 1,000 Ghost Een gathering array. Zhuowen's eyes narrowed and he asked, "Then the other 4 cities at the border have also been set up by someone with this evil array? What is the purpose of setting up such an array?" The purpose, of course, is to quickly increase one's strength. Generally speaking, cultivators absorb the yuan qi of heaven and earth into their bodies to gain strength and raise their cultivation level. Therefore, the energy in a cultivator's body is actually the essence of the yuan qi of heaven and earth. However, for ordinary cultivators, it is impossible for them to refine the energy in a cultivator's body. However, the 1,000 Ghost Een gathering array can simplify this process and become a medium to absorb the energy in a cultivator's body. Once the energy in the 1,000 Ghost Een gathering array reaches a certain level, the person who set up the array only needs to come to the eye of the array and absorb the energy in the array. Then, their cultivation level will rise to an extremely powerful level in a short period of time. Xiaohe continued. Zhuowen's eyes turned cold and he said, "That is to say, the person who set up the array is very likely to be in 3 Origin City?" Xiaohe nodded and said, "Yes, and it should be at the eye of the array. At this moment, it is controlling the ghosts in the array to attack you. If this Dragon Lord had not woken you up just now, I'm afraid you would have become one of the ghosts in this array." Upon hearing these words, Zhuowen's body turned ice cold. He had been too careless this time, and had actually fallen into the trap. Fortunately, Xiaohe had warned him. Otherwise, the consequences would have been unimaginable. "Let's wake Miss Su up first." Looking at Su Ronghua, who was still trapped in the illusion on the bed, Zhuowen formed a sword finger with his right hand, and suddenly pointed it at the former's forehead. Waves of cool immortal power poured into Su Ronghua's mind. Ah! Soon after, Su Ronghua cried out in alarm, and suddenly sat up on the bed. Her eyes were filled with fear, and her breathing was rapid as her chest heaved up and down. "Zhuowen, you!" Su Ronghua quickly noticed Zhuowen, who was beside the bed. She softly cried out, and began to speak incoherently. "Miss Su, listen to me." Zhuowen's expression was solemn. Soon after, he recounted everything that had happened in detail. Su Ronghua did not suspect anything. After all, the ghosts outside the room were the best evidence. 10,000 Ghost Een gathering formation? Someone actually set up such an evil formation in a city at the border of our divine specter realm. It's too hateful. Su Ronghua's beautiful eyes were filled with resentment. It was obvious that she had heard of the 10,000 Ghost Een gathering formation. At this point, Su Ronghua looked at Zhuowen with some worry and said, "Zhuowen, what should we do now? I'm afraid that we have already been discovered by the person who set up the formation. It won't be easy for us to leave this place. There's always a way. Let's wait until tomorrow. The Yin Qi is the strongest at night, and these ghosts are the strongest. Tomorrow the ghost's power will be reduced. Tomorrow, we'll take the initiative to find the person who set up the formation." Zhuowen narrowed his eyes and his voice was slightly cold. This time, he had almost suffered a great loss, so he naturally could not let it go just like that. Hearing this, Su Ronghua nodded lightly and did not refute Zhuowen. Although her cultivation was higher than Zhuowen's by a small realm, in terms of strength, she knew that she was no match for Zhuowen. After all, the young man in front of her was an existence that had killed the 8th level Emperor Stage 7th Azure Dragon Envoy at Capital Sky Peak. Moreover, the 9 Flames karmic fire on Zhuowen's body was very effective against ghosts. Even if they were in the 10,000 Ghost Een gathering formation, those ghosts would not be able to do anything to Zhuowen and her. Just as Su Ronghua's thoughts were running wild, Zhuowen took out a pill from his spirit ring and handed it to her. Su Ronghua was stunned. Soon after, she felt the strong medicinal fragrance from the pill in Zhuowen's hand. That medicinal fragrance actually made her salivate. "This is the Snow Lotus Lustrous Jade Pill, a healing pill. Previously, a lot of your yang qi was absorbed by the ghosts, and your strength was greatly reduced. Take this and heal your injuries first. Tomorrow, we'll go find the person who set up the formation, Zhuowen said indifferently. Receiving the pill, Su Ronghua softly said a word of thanks and swallowed it. What a rich medicinal effect. The instant she swallowed the pill, Su Ronghua's beautiful eyes brightened. In just 10 breaths, she discovered that the medicinal effect of the pill that she had swallowed circulated throughout her body, causing her entire body to feel warm. At this moment, more than half of her previous injuries had been healed. Su Ronghua's beautiful eyes stared at the figure sitting cross-legged on the floor in the room. Her eyes were filled with gratitude. Since this pill had such medicinal effect, it must be extremely precious. The fact that Zhuowen was able to give such a pill to her clearly meant that he treated her as one of his own. This caused Su Ronghua's heart to jump with joy. Time passed very quickly, and the night gradually receded. The ghosts that were originally outside the room had become dispirited. Moreover, they were avoiding the sunlight and burrowed into the ground, not daring to show their heads again. Zhuowen suddenly opened his eyes and withdrew the 9 flames of karma. He said to Su Ronghua, "Miss Su, we were attacked by ghosts last night. I'm afraid that we were discovered by the person who set up the formation. It's not very possible for us to leave 3 Origin City now. Therefore, we need to find the formation core and the person who set it up." Su Ronghua nodded and softly said, "Qin Zhe and the others have more than 20 people. Should we go look for them?" However, Zhuowen shook his head and said, "There's no need to look for them. I'm afraid that they've already met with misfortune and become nourishment for the 1,000 Ghost Yin gathering formation." Hearing this, Su Ronghua gritted her teeth, and a trace of sorrow appeared in her beautiful eyes. In truth, she had already guessed this, but she didn't want to believe it. "Come with me." Zhuowen stepped out of the inn and brought Su Ronghua to the central area of 3 Origin City. Subsequently, he placed his right hand on the ground in the central area, and a surge of mental energy gushed out and drilled into the ground in the central area. After all, Zhuowen had inherited all of the Baifeng's knowledge and experience. With the Baifeng's identity as an arcane saint master, he naturally had a unique method of breaking formations. Chapter 1364. 1364th Formation. I with Zhuowen as the center. Mental energy spread from Zhuowen's palm to the depths of the ground, after which, it radiated towards the entire 3 Yuan city. After the time it takes for half an incense stick to burn, Zhuowen's eyes emitted a bright light. He withdrew his palm and said to Su Ronghua, "Miss Su, come with me. I should have found the location of the formation core." Su Ronghua's beautiful eyes were startled. She involuntarily asked, "So fast? How did you do it?" "Just follow me." Zhuowen did not have time to explain to Su Ronghua. He took a step forward and rushed towards the northwest. Su Ronghua could only follow closely behind Zhuowen. The two of them walked very softly and did not make much noise. After all, there was definitely someone who had set up the formation at the location of the formation eye. If they made too much noise, it was likely that the other party would discover them. When they were near the northwest edge of 3 Yuan City, Zhuowen and Su Ronghua clearly felt that the yin qi in this area was much heavier than other places. Even the light was much dimmer. It was as though the sun was avoiding this area. "The formation eye is in this area," Zhuowen sneered. Su Ronghua followed closely behind Zhuowen. She also felt the sudden increase in the surrounding yin qi. Her face was filled with caution. Yeah. Ghostly wails and howls suddenly sounded in front of them. Soon after, Zhuowen and Su Ronghua were shocked to discover that there was a dense mass of ghosts floating in front of them. These ghosts rotated in a spiral shape, forming a terrifying hurricane. A figure was sitting cross-legged in the middle of the hurricane. "Looks like that is the person who set up the formation." Zhuowen's eyes hardened. He coldly snorted. The 9 flames karmic fire in his body rushed out. He took a step forward and extended his hand. The tiger head clear gold spear appeared in his hand. Ewo! Within the hurricane, countless ghosts naturally noticed Zhuowen, who was rushing over. With a howl, they pounced over in a densely packed manner. intending to swallow this human, who did not know his limits, alive. Boom! Boom! Zhuowen suddenly threw out the long spear in his right hand. The 9 flames karmic fire spread out like the might of heaven, turning into a boundless sea of fire. At the same time, Zhuowen took out the 4 kill array. The 4 array diagrams were arranged in 4 different directions, forming a blood-red cage that trapped the countless ghosts in the surroundings. Kill! Zhuowen spat out this word coldly. Then, the 9 flames of karma and the 4 kills array activated at the same time, completely suppressing the countless ghosts. Destroy, destroy, destroy! Zhuowen roared angrily, and the power of the 9 flames of karma increased by several times. The flames soared into the sky and turned into a terrifying fire pillar. Then the screams of countless ghosts could be heard. In the time it takes for half an incense stick to burn, the ghosts trapped in the 4 kill formation were all annihilated by the power of the 9 flames karmic fire. Zhuowen had exterminated most of the ghosts in the core area of the formation. Only a few scattered ghosts were left, and they avoided Zhuowen from afar, not daring to get close. The human in front of them was too terrifying, especially the flames on his body. They would die with a touch. They were really scared. After exterminating most of the ghosts, Zhuowen came to the figure sitting cross-legged at the core of the formation. This was a middle-aged man with a pale face and a miserable figure. At this moment, the former also saw Zhuowen in front of him. His originally somewhat listless eyes immediately became excited. Kill me, and you will be able to break this 1,000 ghost gathering array. A hoarse and deep voice was emitted from the man's roar. His eyes were filled with hope. He hoped that Zhuowen would kill him and send him on his way. Zhuowen's pupils shrunk. Only then did he realize that the man's legs had been cut off. The exposed thigh bones were pierced by 2 black chains and fixed to the core of the formation. This was also why Zhuowen saw the man sitting cross-legged from afar. Who are you? Zhuowen frowned. This man was definitely not the one who set up the formation. Then who was he? The middle-aged man smiled bitterly and said, I am Feng Tianshao, the city lord of 3 Elements City. I am tied to the core of the formation by the person who set it up. With my strength, I am able to maintain the operation of the 1,000 ghost gathering array. Kill me, and you will be able to break the formation. Kill me. I have already suffered for several days in the core of the formation. The pain is worse than death. I only want to die now. Kill me. Looking at the middle-aged man begging for his life, Zhuowen's expression was extremely complicated. How much pain did a mid-level emperor have to endure to make him beg for death? At this moment, Su Ronghua came to Zhuowen's side. Seeing the middle-aged man's miserable state, Su Ronghua couldn't help but exclaim, Sorry, I will send you on your way. Zhuowen's face darkened. Then, the tiger head clear golden spear swept across the middle-aged man's face. With a plop, the middle-aged man's head fell to the ground. Zhuowen controlled his strength very well. The moment the tiger head clear golden spear chopped off the middle-aged man's head, he also used his strength to destroy the nascent soul in the man's body. After all, the middle-aged man's nascent soul was also connected to the core of the 1,000 ghost gathering array. If he didn't destroy it, he would still be in agony. Once the middle-aged man died, the chi around 3 Elements City slowly dissipated. Sunlight shone on the area once again. Zhuowen he. Su Ronghua pointed at the middle-aged man's corpse and couldn't help but say, He is not the person who set up the formation. He is the city lord of 3 Elements City. The person who set up the formation imprisoned him in the core of the formation and used his energy to power the 1,000 ghost gathering array. Zhuowen said plainly, The person who set up the formation is not in 3 Elements City? Su Ronghua asked in astonishment. I'm afraid not. However, since the 1,000 ghost gathering array has been broken, the person who set up the formation will definitely discover it. I believe that the person who set up the formation will come to 3 Elements City soon. Zhuowen said calmly. Su Ronghua was shocked and immediately said, I have to inform the Tiandu Peak Master about the situation here. Zhuowen, why don't we return first? The person who can set up such a large formation is definitely not an ordinary person. Zhuowen's eyes flickered as he said in a deep voice, You are right. Let's return first. Zhuowen could faintly feel that the person who set up the formation was definitely not a kind person. If he guessed correctly, the 1,000 Ghost Een gathering array was probably set up in the other 4 cities at the border. Swoosh! Summoning the scarlet cloud flying sword. The 2 of them stepped on the flying sword, and suddenly flew out of 3 Elements City. Hee. You still want to leave after breaking my 1,000 Ghost Een gathering array? The moment the scarlet cloud flying sword flew out of 3 Elements City, a sinister voice rang out. Following which, a resounding dragon roar came from the horizon. Following which, a dragon-shaped sound wave swooped down and heavily bombarded the scarlet cloud flying sword. Zhuowen and Su Ronghua were caught off guard and were hit directly by the dragon-shaped sound wave. The violent sound wave surged into their 7 orifices, causing them to bleed. Damn it! Zhuowen roared furiously as celestial energy gushed out from his body and formed a solid barrier in front of the 2 of them, blocking the terrifying sound wave outside. The 2 of them were also forced to stop the scarlet cloud flying sword, and once again landed in 3 Elements City. Zhuowen raised his head and immediately saw 2 figures flying over from the horizon of 3 Elements City. Among the 2 figures, one of them was a young man with an ordinary appearance and a stern expression. The young man walked over step by step as dragon roars gushed out from the soles of his feet, giving off a terrifying aura. The other person's entire body was shrouded in black qi, revealing only a pair of blood-red eyes. Oh, so it's an old acquaintance. Zhuowen, you really did enter the divine nether realm, and even let us meet here. Looks like we are fated to meet. The figure shrouded in black qi laughed strangely. Skyworm, you're actually not dead? Zhuowen's expression became somewhat ugly. He recognized the identity of the figure shrouded in black qi. It was Skyworm who had escaped from the Emperor's tomb. Beside Zhuowen, Su Ronghua's beautiful eyes landed on the young man beside Skyworm, and could not help but exclaim, Blue Dragon Hall's Qinglongzi. Qinglongzi. Zhuowen's pupils shrank. He had naturally heard of Qinglongzi before. It was said that Qinglongzi was the strongest genius in the Blue Dragon Hall, and was a monster that Sapphire Shore had carefully nurtured since young. His reputation was as great as Yang Yi's in the younger generation of the 9 Nether Realm. Little girl, you have good eyesight. As a reward, I'll give you a quick death later. Skyworm laughed. Qinglongzi's expression was indifferent. He did not even look at Zhuowen and Su Ronghua. In his eyes, the 2 people in front of him were too weak and could not arouse his interest at all. You guys have guts. You actually dared to set up the 1,000 Ghost Een gathering array in the divine nether realm. Once the people from the inner academy find out, the 2 of you won't be able to escape, Zhuowen said in a stern voice. Immediately after, he took out a jade talisman and quietly crushed it. What are you doing? Skyworm's eyes were sharp. He immediately saw Zhuowen's little action. With a sharp hiss, he rushed towards Zhuowen below. Countless black qi condensed into powerful tentacles and wrapped Zhuowen's entire body. Boom! A pillar of fire that soared into the sky rushed out from Zhuowen's side. Then, a figure stepped out from the pillar of fire. After that, a cold snort was heard and the pillar of fire turned into a huge flaming palm. Whoosh whoosh whoosh! The flaming palm whistled through the air and smashed onto Skyworm's body, causing Skyworm to groan and continuously retreat. Stinking brat! You used the jade talisman I gave you so quickly? The flaming palm retracted, and Xiaoyu stepped out from the pillar of fire. He stared at Zhuowen and said in astonishment, Take a look for yourself. Zhuowen was too lazy to explain, and said as he pointed at Skyworm and Qinglongzi. Oh, Qinglongzi, why did you guys from the Blue Dragon Hall come to my divine nether realm? Xiaoyu's face instantly darkened as he coldly said, Martial Uncle Xiaoyu. They also set up the 1,000 Ghost Een gathering array in the 5 cities at the border. 3 Yuan City, Misty City, and the other 4 cities have already become dead cities. Even the 20 over Sky Capital Peak core disciples we brought have become nourishment for the 1,000 Ghost Een gathering array. Su Ronghua said, What? You guys actually set up such an evil array, like the 1,000 Ghost Een gathering array. You guys really deserve to die. Hearing this, Xiaoyu's eyes widened. The law of fire was exposed all over his body. Without another word, he rushed towards Qing Longzi. I've long wanted to challenge the strength of the peak master of the inner courtyard. Today, I want to see how strong you, the peak master of Ao Yuan Peak, are. Chapter 1365. Hall of Ice and Fire, open. Boom! Qing Longzi and Xiao Yu instantly collided. Afterwards, a deafening explosion rang out in the air. Afterwards, Xiao Yu and Qing Longzi both took several dozen steps back. Qing Longzi is only an invincible emperor lord, right? He's actually on par with Xiao Yu? Zhuowen narrowed his eyes at this sight. He was shocked by Qing Longzi's battle prowess. After all, Xiao Yu was a half-saint who had grasped the laws of fire. In terms of battle prowess, he was definitely much stronger than regular invincible emperor lords. However, Xiao Yu was unable to gain any advantage over Qing Longzi. It was clear just how terrifying Qing Longzi's strength was. Is this all the peak lords of the inner court have? Let's try again. Qing Longzi sneered. The dragon's roar on his body became louder and louder. Battle intent surged into the sky, forming a terrifying storm. Xiao Yu's expression was ugly. Qing Longzi's strength had somewhat exceeded his imagination. His cultivation was below his, but he was still able to force him to retreat. He was just too monstrous. Qing Longzi, the energy of the myriad ghost Yin congregation arrays in the other 4 cities has been collected. However, the myriad ghost Yin congregation array in 3 origin city has been destroyed. There is no need for us to stay. Skyworm suddenly sent a voice transmission to Qing Longzi. This time, they had come to the 9th netherworld realm to collect some energy from the flesh and blood of Emperor Realm cultivators. Now that they had been discovered by the people of the inner court, there was naturally no reason for them to stay. After all, if the 3 saints of the inner court were drawn out, they wouldn't even be able to leave. Qing Longzi frowned slightly. He replied coldly, "Don't order me around. You don't have the right." Tiangu was stunned. Soon after, he replied with a sunken expression, "I'm not ordering you around. I'm just suggesting. If you're not leaving, I'll be leaving first." As he spoke, Tiangu took out a medallion. A profound spatial energy surged out from the medallion. Tiangu glanced deeply at Zhuowen, before disappearing under the spatial energy. A spatial teleportation medallion. Sapphire sure is generous. He actually gave you such a precious medallion, Xiao Yu said with a rather ugly expression. Qing Longzi did not say much. He took out his token and left the Divine Spectre realm. This spatial teleportation token had a special teleportation array that could allow one to enter from the outside world without going through the entrance of the Divine Spectre realm. Its nature was somewhat similar to illegal immigration. Old man Xiao, you need to tell Marshal Granduncle Yanji and the others about the Skyworm. Looking at Qing Longzi's appearance just now, I'm afraid that the relationship between the Skyworm and the Blue Dragon Hall isn't ordinary. Zhuowen suddenly said to Xiao Yu. The heavenly insect was something that even Xiao He was extremely fearful of. Zhuowen had no choice but to be cautious. Originally, Zhuowen had thought that the heavenly insect would disappear along with Mu Feng's death. However, he didn't expect that the heavenly insect's life force to be so tenacious that it actually didn't die in the end. That black thing beside Qing Longzi is a heavenly insect. Xiao Yu's expression turned cold. Soon after, he said cautiously, I indeed have to tell Marshal Uncle Yanji and the others about this matter. Looks like we have to guard against that Blue Dragon Hall. Looking at the appearance of the heavenly insect and Qing Longzi, I'm afraid that the 2 of them have reached some kind of agreement. If necessary, the heavenly insect must be eliminated. Zhuowen's expression was extremely solemn. After inheriting the memories of the Baifeng, he was very clear about the terror of the heavenly insect. Even if it was only a heavenly insect clone, and its growth might be limited, it was still not something that a mere 9 secluded realm could accommodate. If he was not careful, the heavenly insect might bring disaster to the 9 secluded realm. Xiao Yu shook his head and said, if the heavenly insect really has a deep relationship with the Blue Dragon Hall, our Divine Spectre realm will not be able to eliminate the heavenly insect. After all, the Blue Dragon Hall stands behind it. That Blue Dragon Hall is the #1 power in the 9 secluded realm, and its foundation is much deeper than our inner courtyard. Hearing that, Zhuowen frowned. Could it be that he was going to let the heavenly insect grow stronger like this? Brat, you should increase your own strength as soon as possible. The heavenly insect is currently in the Blue Dragon Hall, so you won't have the chance to eliminate that guy. The only thing you can do now is to continuously become stronger. If you become strong enough, the heavenly insect will not be able to threaten you. Xiaohe suddenly said. Zhuowen was startled, then nodded his head. Xiaohe was right. Rather than hoping for the heavenly insect to be destroyed, it was better to strengthen himself. The two of you return to the inner courtyard first. I'll stay here and observe. Maybe those 2 bastards haven't left yet. Xiao Yu instructed, then flew towards the direction of Misty Delight City. Zhuowen, let's go as well. I need to inform the Sky Capital Peak Master about this matter. At that time, the inner courtyard will send some experts to search this place. What happens next is not something we can worry about. Su Ronghua smiled at Zhuowen. Let's go. Zhuowen nodded, then activated the Scarlet Cloud Flying Sword. The two of them turned into a stream of light and disappeared from the place. 3 days later, the two of them returned to the inner courtyard. Su Ronghua bade farewell to Zhuowen, then returned to Sky Capital Peak to report what had happened at the border. Zhuowen returned to Mysterious Origin Peak and silently cultivated, waiting for the opening of the Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Palace. Later, Xiao Yu also returned to Mysterious Origin Peak, but judging from his ugly expression, he did not gain anything. Time passed by. When the sun shone on the earth in the early morning, the entire inner courtyard began to bustle with noise and excitement. Many disciples who were originally in seclusion walked out of their seclusion, each with a look of excitement in their eyes. A slender figure walked out of an elegant bamboo house on Mysterious Origin Peak. Lu Qingwei raised her head and stared at the huge Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Palace in the sky above the 9 peaks. The corners of her mouth curled into a smile. After half a year of hard work, my cultivation base has finally risen from the 7th layer Emperor Realm to the 8th layer Emperor Realm. I hope I can get a good ranking for Mysterious Origin Peak this time. Lu Qing said confidently. Not far from Lu Qing, a young man also walked out of a large bamboo house. The young man stretched his waist and looked at the Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Palace in the center of the 9 peaks. His eyes were full of expectation. On Sky Capital Peak, Mu Qinshuo stood gracefully. Not far from her, Jian Mu was staring at Mu Qinshuo's back with an expressionless face. Senior brother Yang Yi, why haven't you come out yet? The Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Palace is about to open. Not far away, Feng Nianlan stood with her hands on her waist and shouted loudly under Yang Yi's pavilion, attracting the attention of many disciples. What's the hurry? It hasn't started yet, has it? Yang Yi slowly walked out of the pavilion. His eyes were hazy, and he always looked like he hadn't woken up. He raised his head and looked at the hall of ice and fire floating in the air. He yawned and said, "Call me again when we start." Then, Yang Yi patted his butt and lay down on the floor of the pavilion. He closed his eyes and began to sleep. On Divine Devil Peak, Fuyu crossed his arms and his eyes were full of fighting spirit. Beside him stood a rather simple and honest young man. "Jianan, your talent is not bad. It has only been 3 months, and you have successfully cultivated the 2nd transformation of the 9 transformations of demons and gods. The opening of the Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Palace is an opportunity for you. Seize it well." Fuyu said to the young man beside him. "Hehe, that's for sure." Jianan grinned and replied in high fighting spirit. On Taishan Peak, Moyan Wushang and Qingyin stood quietly behind Yuan Wanha. Yuan Wanha stared at the Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Palace and said softly, "Junior sisters, this time we don't intend to fight for a good ranking. We just need to do our best. Everything has to be done according to our ability, because the dangers of the Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Palace are not small." Moyan Wushang and Qingyin looked at each other and nodded. On Hidden Sword Peak, on top of a sword-shaped building, Su Lingping stood quietly with a small sword on her waist. A cool breeze blew, blowing her messy hair. Su Lingping finally spoke. She slowly turned around and stared at the determined young man behind her. Mo Lingtian, if you want to prove yourself, prove it in the Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Palace. If you can persist to the 5th floor, I will ask the Peak Master to pass the complete Heaven Burial Sword Manual to you. Mo Lingtian cupped his hands and said with a determined expression, Senior Sister Su, don't worry. I will not disappoint you this time. Looking at the determined young man in front of her, Su Lingping's beautiful eyes flickered. She was slightly moved, but she quickly regained her calmness and said calmly, I hope so. On Great Void Peak, Ding Xingho, who was dressed as a Taoist, rubbed his hands and smiled at the girl beside him. Junior Sister Gatha, the Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Palace is very dangerous. When you enter, you have to follow me closely. I will protect you. Gatha raised her chin and snorted. Fight with me first. If you can defeat me, I will listen to you and let you protect me. Hearing this, Ding Xingho's face suddenly turned bitter. Junior Sister, aren't you making things difficult for me? Your Heaven's Wrath armored soul is too abnormal. I'm afraid I can't defeat you. You can't defeat me, and you still want to protect me? Gatha snorted, then patted her collar and said proudly, It's more like I'll protect you. Once we enter the Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Palace, you have to follow me closely. I will protect you. On Profound Underworld Peak, a young man with a blue ruler on his back silently stood on the peak. His gaze was not on the Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Palace, but in the direction of Profound Origin Peak. Peak Master wants me to enter the Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Palace, this time to properly teach that guy called Zhuowen a lesson. Looks like I can have some fun. Qianqi grinned. His smile was extremely cold. Above the Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Palace, there was a layer of white clouds. On the white clouds was a white round table. At this moment, 12 figures were sitting at the round table. These 12 figures were the 9 Peak Masters Yanji Wenbai and Jiang Xian. Hee, it's finally time for the Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Palace to open again. I wonder who will go the furthest and last the longest this time. Yanji laughed. Chapter 1366. Entering the Ice and Fire Dual Pole Palace, everyone at the round table curled their lips. Clearly, they were not interested in old man Tiandu's boasting. However, they could not refute him. Yang Yi was indeed the most talented genius in the inner academy. The other 8 Peak Masters were envious of old man Tiandu for being able to find a genius like Yang Yi. We are not surprised that Yang Yi is first. Let's discuss which of the 9 peaks will be ranked last. Xianzhong narrowed his eyes and glanced at Xiaoyu. He suddenly laughed strangely. Sure enough, when Xianzhong said that, everyone's eyes fell on Xiaoyu. Xiaoyu's face immediately turned ugly. What are you looking at? Our Ao Yuan peak may not be ranked last. Xiaoyu glared at Xianzhong and said coldly, Junior brother Xiaoyu, I didn't say that your Ao Yuan peak is ranked last. Why are you so anxious? Xianzhong mocked. Xiaoyu's face froze. He immediately kept quiet. Xianzhong was obviously targeting him, but he could not refute him. After all, Ao Yuan Peak was ranked last among the 9 peaks. Alright, we can't come to a conclusion about the final ranking. The violent energy on the surface of the Ice and Fire Dual Pole Palace will soon weaken. We just need to watch the performance of those little fellows. Yanji waved his hand and said, causing everyone at the round table to quiet down. The Ice and Fire Dual Pole Palace quietly floated in the middle of the 9 peaks. 9 thick chains extended from 9 directions and landed on the top of the 9 peaks, fixing them in the air. The white fog that lingered around the middle of the 9 huge peaks gradually dissipated at this moment. The 9 peaks appeared very clear at this moment. At the bottom of the 9 peaks, countless official disciples and nominal disciples raised their heads and looked at the 9 peaks and the Ice and Fire Polarity Palace in the center. Their eyes were filled with shock. They had just entered the inner courtyard not long ago, and it was their first time seeing the 9 peaks and the Ice and Fire Polarity Palace. This was especially true for the Ice and Fire Dual Pole Palace. Such a magnificent building, and the ice and fire energy emitted from its surface completely shocked these official disciples and nominal disciples. The Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Palace has a total of 18 levels. They contain the power of ice and fire, and contain great opportunities. If one is lucky, they can break through their current realm in a short time. Although this is the time when the energy of the Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Palace is at its weakest, the danger is still very high. Everyone who enters must be cautious. Do not be greedy and act rashly. If you cannot withstand it, you can just think of leaving. When the time comes, I will hear your thoughts and teleport you out. A dignified voice rang out from the clouds above the Hall of Ice and Fire. It was like a clap of thunder, as it reverberated through the entire inner courtyard. It was Yanji's voice. When these words were spoken, countless disciples on the 9 peaks revealed excited expressions, as they involuntarily nodded their heads. Ice and Fire Dual Extremes Palace, open now. Afterwards, Yanji's voice sounded again. Then, the sound of a door opening reverberated from the Hall of Ice and Fire. The large doors of the Hall of Ice and Fire, which were dozens of feet tall, opened to the sides. Waves of strange ice and fire energy flowed out, as an explosive sound was emitted in the air. It was quite ear-piercing and frightening. The Hall of Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Palace has opened. All of you should follow the chains on your respective peaks, and approach the Hall of Ice and Fire. Those who are not strong enough should know their limits, and give up as soon as possible. Otherwise it will be too late for regrets. Yanji's voice once again sounded. His tone had become extremely cautious. Soon after, it gradually became quiet. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Many rushing air sounds resounded over the 9 peaks not long after Yanji's words sounded. Soon after, countless number of core disciples rushed out from the 9 peaks. They followed the chains on their respective peaks, and approached the Ice-Fire Dual Pole Hall in the middle. They were densely packed like locusts. At Ao Yuan Peak, Lu Qing smiled and said to Zhuowen beside him, "Junior brother Zhuowen, let's also set off." Zhuowen nodded. However, his eyes landed on Capital Sky Peak. A beautiful figure was standing there. Her eyes also landed on Ao Yuan Peak. The moment Zhuowen's eyes turned over, they coincidentally met with a pair of beautiful eyes. The two of them looked at each other and smiled. He saw Mu Qinshua's lips wiggle. The corners of Zhuowen's mouth revealed an arc. He naturally understood the meaning behind her lips. Do your best. Be careful. Do your best too. Be careful. Zhuowen muttered in his mouth. Soon after, his eyes landed on the Hall of Ice and Fire. He had a feeling that he might be able to undergo some kind of transformation after entering the Hall of Ice and Fire. Swoosh. Lu Qing stomped her foot and leaped onto the thick chains that connected the Hall of Ice and Fire on Ao Yuan Peak. She took the lead and rushed towards the Hall of Ice and Fire. Zhuowen followed closely behind. However, the moment his feet landed on the chains, a powerful ice and fire energy spread from the chains and spread around his body. This caused Zhuowen to feel uncomfortable all over. It's really not an ordinary ice and fire energy. Zhuowen's pupils shrank. His body trembled. The immortal energy in his body circulated, and the ice and fire energy that invaded his body was immediately expelled by Zhuowen. The moment Zhuowen stepped on the chains, Mu Qinshuo also set off from Capital Sky Peak. Jianmu followed closely behind, following closely behind Mu Qinshuo. As for Feng Nianlan, she was currently entangled with Yang Yi. This Yang Yi was too lazy. He was still lying on the ground and sleeping. Feng Nianlan stomped her feet in anger. "Senior brother, I don't care about you anymore. I'm leaving first." Feng Nianlan could be considered to have lost her temper because of Yang Yi. She stomped her feet and flew out, also rushing towards the Hall of Ice and Fire. Above the clouds, everyone stared at Old Man Tian, Du with a strange expression. They naturally also saw Yang Yi, who was still sleeping soundly. Old Man Tian Du smiled awkwardly and said, "That brat Yang Yi has such a character. Everyone please forgive him. He will catch up later." As he spoke, Old Man Tian Du cursed in his heart. Yesterday, he had clearly told Yang Yi to pay attention to this opportunity of entering the Hall of Ice and Fire. It seemed that this brat had completely turned a deaf ear to his words. He had painstakingly said a lot of things yesterday. It was really a waste of breath. On the chains, Zhuowen stepped forward step by step. He found that as he approached the Hall of Ice and Fire, the ice and fire energy became more and more terrifying. Even Zhuowen had to treat it with caution. Zhuowen even saw that the core disciples of the other main peaks, who had rushed out first, had generally slowed down after reaching half the distance of the chains. Some of them even half-squatted on the spot, not daring to move. Cold sweat trickled down their foreheads. Obviously, the strength of the ice and fire energy above had exceeded the range that these disciples could withstand. When they reached 2/3 of the chains, some of the disciples had already stopped moving forward and retreated to the main peaks they were on. As time passed, the number of disciples who retreated gradually increased. Zhuowen originally only had a dozen or so Ao Yuan Peak disciples on the chains. At this moment, only he and Lu Qing were still on the chains, approaching the Hall of Ice and Fire. Someone has reached the gate of the Hall of Ice and Fire first. Suddenly, a cry of surprise rang out, immediately attracting the attention of everyone on the chains. Everyone's eyes fell on the gate of the Hall of Ice and Fire, where a tall and sturdy young man with bluish-black skin stood quietly. It's the eldest direct disciple of the Divine Devil Peak, Fu Yu. As expected, he has reached the Hall of Ice and Fire first. Soon, someone recognized the young man, and an uproar broke out in the surroundings. Fu Yu frowned slightly. His sharp gaze fell in the direction of Sky Capital Peak. Then he saw Yang Yi, who was still sleeping soundly on the ground. Black lines appeared on his forehead. What an arrogant fellow. Yang Yi, if you don't leave now, you will regret it later. Fu Yu coldly snorted. His voice was like 9 heavenly thunder, exploding in the air. Soon after, Fu Yu leaped into the Hall of Ice and Fire. Oh my god! Yang Yi has not left yet. Isn't he too arrogant? No, that Yang Yi seems to be sleeping. Is it my imagination? He is sleeping at such an important time. The group was speechless. It was as if 1,000 alpacas were galloping in their hearts. The opening of the Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Palace was an unprecedented grand occasion in the entire inner yard. Yet, Yang Yi was actually sleeping at such a time. Moreover, he was sleeping openly under the watchful eyes of so many people in the open air. Zhuowen's gaze also fell on Yang Yi, who was leaning against the Sky Capital Peak's square. A strange look appeared in his eyes. This heaven's pride of the inner academy, who was praised by Xiaoyu, had a strange character. Above the clouds, old man Tiandu wanted to cry but had no tears. He had just said that the first place in the Hall of Ice and Fire would undoubtedly be Yang Yi. But now, Yang Yi had ruthlessly slapped his face. Old man Tiandu felt extremely helpless in his heart. With Fu Yu as an example, the following cultivators also arrived at the entrance of the Hall of Ice and Fire. However, the first to arrive were the direct disciples of the various peaks. Jianmu, Ding Xingho, Su Lingping, Xian Qi, Yuan Wanha and Mu Qinshua also successfully arrived at the entrance. After arriving at the entrance, they rushed into the Hall of Ice and Fire without stopping. Lu Qing was the 15th to arrive at the Hall of Ice and Fire, while Zhuowen followed closely behind, arriving at the 16th. Zhuowen, the Hall of Ice and Fire contains a universe. Every level has a huge space. Entering is random, and the ice and fire energy inside is extremely powerful. You must be careful. Moreover, the ice and fire energy will become more terrifying as the number of levels increases. If you can't endure it, don't persist. It's best to immediately leave the Hall of Ice and Fire. Lu Qing cautiously instructed before stepping into the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Hall. The Hall of Ice and Fire. I'm finally going to enter. I wonder if the symbol spirit still remembers the promise of 10 years. Zhuowen muttered in a low voice. He also stepped into the Hall of Ice and Fire, disappearing at the entrance. Chapter 1367. Equilibrium Point. With that, Yang Yi took a step forward and landed on the chain, as if he had teleported. Under the dumbfounded gazes of many disciples, it only took him 10 breaths to reach the entrance of the Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Palace. His speed was much faster than Fu Yu's. So fast, everyone stared blankly at Yang Yi, who had stepped into the Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Palace, unable to speak for a long time. This Yang Yi is so fast. And I don't think I've ever seen this guy display his full strength, right? Tiandu, I wonder how strong Yang Yi is now. Above the clouds, Yan Ji nodded in admiration. The others also stared curiously at Tiandu Yang. He was very famous in the Nine Nether Realm. But this guy was very low-key, and had an extremely lazy personality, so he had never shown his true strength. Old man Tiandu smiled bitterly. Actually, I'm not too sure. I only know that this guy has become an invincible emperor lord a long time ago. As for what law he comprehended, he didn't even tell me, nor did he show it. Oh, he didn't even tell you? Why is this little guy so secretive? From my point of view, this little guy should have reached the quasi-holy realm. But as for what law he comprehended, I can't tell at the moment, Yan Ji said with a smile. Old man Tiandu smiled helplessly. No matter what Yang Yi did, he wouldn't tell him, his master, about it. He didn't even tell him about his breakthrough, which made him feel very helpless. AI. With this little brat's talent, his strength should surpass mine. I just don't know how strong he is. Old man Tiandu smiled happily. Although he was very unhappy with Yang Yi's methods, the latter was still his direct disciple. He was naturally gratified to see his disciple achieve so much. The space within the twin extremes of Ice and Fire Palace was very large. The place where Zhuowen appeared was a huge hall of the palace. The floor of this hall was paved with white marble, and there were thick stone pillars around it. The left side of these stone pillars was fiery red, and emitted boiling hot air, while the right side was icy blue, and filled with cold air. In the middle of these stone pillars was a long path. The ground of this path was alternating between red and blue, and the eruption of ice and fire energy was very intense. Zhuowen found that there were many similar paths in the surroundings, and each path corresponded to a disciple. Zhuowen could even see two other figures on the left and right side of the path. These two figures were also wearing the uniform of the Inner Academy. However, Zhuowen did not recognize them. They should be the core disciples of the other main peaks. Looks like this path is path. I wonder what's at the end of this path. Zhuowen Emperor Lord of Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Palace of Ice and Fire Dual Polarity of Ice and Fire Dual Divine Ice Dual 9 Nether 9 Ice Dual Polarity Divine Emperor Yang Yang Yi Yang Divine Yang Divine Yang 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 Divine. Although Zhuowen had relied on the Ice-Fire Holy Symbol to fuse the Ice-Fire Holy Symbol before, he did not understand the principle behind the fusion of the two types of energy. Instead, he had relied on the Ice-Fire Holy Symbol to forcefully fuse them together. Now, after Zhuowen entered the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Palace, he discovered that the ice and fire energies were perfectly combined. There were no explosive fluctuations, and everything was extremely harmonious. Furthermore, Zhuowen could faintly sense that the ice and fire energy in the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Hall was much more powerful than the Ice and Fire Lotus that Zhuowen had fused with back then. How did the Ice and Fire Dual Extremes Palace do this? A sliver of thought appeared in Zhuowen's eyes. At this moment, he stopped and stared at the ground that had been condensed from ice and fire energy. He seemed to be frozen in place. Above the clouds, Yanji Jiangxian, Wenbai and the 9 peak masters were seated around a round table. Many specks of light appeared on the round table. Each speck of light had its own name, representing the identity of the disciple who had entered the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Hall. Fuyu's speed is pretty good. He's far ahead, and has already entered the 2nd floor. He's not far from the 3rd floor. Lu Yuanhua was in a good mood, and could not help but laugh. Lu Yuanhua, look again. Fuyu is now 2nd. He was just surpassed by Yang Yi. Old man Tiandu smiled. His face was full of pride. Lu Yuanhua's face immediately stiffened. He lowered his head, and saw that Fuyu's speck of light was ranked 2nd. His face could not help but turn ugly. The direct disciples of the main peaks are now far ahead of the other core disciples, Yanji said with a smile. Everyone nodded. The round table would automatically display the rankings. The top 20 were basically occupied by the direct disciples. The top 5 were Yang Yi, Fuyu Jianmu, Ding Xingho and Su Lingping. Xianqi was ranked 6th. After Xianqi was Mu Chenxue. Mu Chenxue's performance had caught the attention of the peak masters at the round table. Mu Chenxue had just become a direct disciple, and had successfully cultivated the heavenly inquiring ancient scripture. Moreover, her cultivation had leaped to the high-level emperor realm. Her talent could be said to be extremely outstanding. Now, she had entered the top 10 in the Ice and Fire Duel Extreme Hall. This was something that the Peak Masters had not expected. The Sky Capital Peak is doing well. Yang Yi is first, Jianmu is third, Mu Chenxue is seventh, and Feng Nianlan is 10th. After entering the Ice and Fire Duel Extreme Hall, all 4 of your direct disciples have entered the top 10, Yan Ji said with a smile. Old man Tiandu waved his hand and said, "It's just the beginning." Whether they can maintain the top 10 is still unknown. Martial Uncle Yan Ji, you're wrong. Not all of the direct disciples are far ahead. I see that there's still one direct disciple at the bottom. All of a sudden, an ambiguous voice rang out. Xianzhong glanced at Xiao Yu meaningfully and chuckled mischievously. Everyone was stunned. Immediately, their eyes fell on the round table. Then they saw that at the very end, there was an extremely familiar light spot. This light spot was called Zhuowen. Ao Yuan Peak's direct disciple Zhuowen? Why did this kid stop at the first level, not moving at all? On the round table, the others were discussing spiritedly. Xiao Yu's face was extremely gloomy. He glared at Xianzhong fiercely and frowned. He had already noticed Zhuowen's abnormality. After entering the first level, this kid stopped moving forward. Now he was far behind the others and was ranked last. Yan Ji, Jiang Xian, and Wenbai also looked at the motionless light spot that represented Zhuowen in surprise. Their eyes flickered. The 3 of them had seen Zhuowen's strength. It should be no problem for this kid to reach the first 5 levels. Now that he stopped at the first level, it was indeed a little strange. On the first level, Zhuowen sat silently on the path, thinking about the principle of the perfect combination of ice and fire energy contained in the Ice and Fire Duel Extreme Hall. The ice and fire energy on this level is not strong enough. I have to go up and try. Muttering softly, Zhuowen continued to walk forward. At the end of the path was a flight of stairs. Zhuowen stepped on the stairs and entered the second level. The scenery on the second level was not much different from the first level. The only difference was that the ice and fire energy on the second level was much stronger than the first level. Zhuowen silently experienced the ice and fire energy, and once again fell into deep thought. 1 day later, Zhuowen entered the third level. 3 days later he entered the fourth level. 5 days later, he entered the fifth level. When Zhuowen arrived at the sixth level, he could clearly feel that the surrounding ice and fire energy had become much more violent. It was as if the ice and fire energy had undergone a qualitative change at this moment. Its power had increased by more than just a little. The ice and fire energy has increased so much, yet I can still perfectly combine these 2 extreme energies without losing control and exploding. I have to find a balance between the 2 energies. As long as I can find a balance between the 2 energies, then no matter how powerful the ice and fire energy is, they can be perfectly combined and create a perfect and powerful new energy. Zhuowen muttered to himself. Afterward, the karmic flames of 9 flames appeared in his right hand, and the dark frost poison appeared in his left hand. Under Zhuowen's control, the 2 extreme energies slowly fused together. CI. Wisps of sparks burst out from the point of contact between the 2 types of energy, and there was also a slight muffled sound of sparks exploding. Balance. We have to find the balance between these 2 types of energy. Zhuowen muttered to himself with a serious look in his eyes. The dark cold poison and the 9 flames karmic fire finally fused together. Then, Zhuowen frowned because he didn't feel the balance between the 2 during the process of fusion. Not good. At the same time, an extremely berserk energy erupted from Zhuowen's hands. This energy was too terrifying, causing Zhuowen's soul to tremble. He immediately threw out the energy in his hands. Rumble. In the vast hall, the new energy formed by the combination of the dark cold poison and the 9 flames karmic fire suddenly exploded. The aftermath of the explosion spread in all directions. Zhuowen involuntarily retreated under the aftermath. His eyebrows were tightly knitted together. The ice and fire energy that he had combined was still so unstable. If he was careless, it would explode. It was very difficult to control. How can I find the balance point? Zhuowen softly muttered and fell into deep thought. The entire ice and fire dual extreme hall shook a little due to the explosion. This caused the other disciples, who were still advancing in the hall, to reveal a surprised expression and halt their footsteps. Even the direct disciples, who were far ahead of the core disciples, paused their footsteps because of this. However, this pause didn't last for long. The many disciples in the hall continued to advance in an orderly manner. In the depths of the 18th floor of the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Hall, there was a sealed cage. Within this cage floated a talisman that was alternating between red and blue. Chapter 1368. Xian Qi. When the entire Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Palace shook, the talisman in the cage suddenly trembled and emitted a buzzing sound. I can sense the trace of origin energy that I purposely released. That young man has come to the Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Palace. He has come to keep his promise. An ancient voice rang out from the cage. The talisman floating in the middle of the cage started to tremble like a human, as if it was filled with excitement. Young man, as long as you can reach the 8th floor, I will be able to pull you to the 18th floor. I will give you endless benefits as long as you do not disappoint me. The distant voice rang out from the bottom of the Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Palace. It spread upwards, passing through layer after layer of barriers, and reached the 6th floor where Zhuowen was. This is the talisman spirit's voice? Zhuowen, who was on the 6th floor, turned serious. The Ice and Fire Saint talisman on the back of his hands flickered, and the talisman spirit's voice rang out in his ears. Kid, do you plan to enter the 8th floor immediately? Xiaohei suddenly asked. Zhuowen shook his head and said, let's wait a little longer. I need to understand the law of the fusion of ice and fire energy. I feel that I am not far from the equilibrium point of the fusion of ice and fire energy. I just need a little more time. Then you should enter the 7th floor. The ice and fire energy there should be able to give you more inspiration, Xiaohei said indifferently. Zhuowen nodded when he heard this. He walked along the path of ice and fire step by step. When he reached the end, he stepped onto the stairs and ascended to the 7th floor. The scenery on the 7th floor is different from the 6th floor? When he entered the 7th floor, Zhuowen's eyes revealed a startled expression because the scene on the 7th floor was no longer a large hall surrounded by stone pillars of fire and ice, but a long bridge. The surface of the long bridge was covered in pure white snow, and below the bridge was a sea of lava. At the end of the bridge, ice and lava intersected, forming an arc of ice and fire. It looked exceptionally strange. The ice and fire energy here is much stronger than on the 6th floor. Zhuowen muttered in a low voice as he walked towards the end of the long bridge. As he walked, the ice and snow above the bridge drifted and gathered into a terrifying snowstorm. The lava under the bridge raged and turned into a fire dragon that was thousands of feet long. The snowstorm and fire dragon roared at the same time, sandwiching Zhuowen in the middle. Ice and fire intertwined, producing a terrifying energy that crushed Zhuowen's body, causing Zhuowen's body to freeze and his speed to slow down. This ice and fire energy even began to corrode Zhuowen's body. Zhuowen furrowed his brows. With a wave of his sleeve, he summoned the 4-kill array, which revolved around his body. Immediately, the ice and fire energies that were squeezing towards him were blocked by the 4-kill array, unable to get close to Zhuowen. Zhuowen's footsteps did not change as he strode forward. Soon he arrived at the end of the long bridge. Quietly staring at the arc formed by the fusion of ice and fire, Zhuowen revealed a thoughtful look. This arc has a good balance between the ice and fire energies. Zhuowen muttered softly. His eyes flickered with light. Then, he sat down cross-legged on the ground and stared at the arc of ice and fire energy in front of him. Zhuowen did not compete for the ranking. Ever since he entered the Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Palace, the ranking did not mean much to him, because what he wanted was not what the ranking could give him. After all, what he wanted was the core of the Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Palace, the main body of the Ice and Fire Sacred Symbol. Yang Yi has arrived at the 13th floor. His speed is too fast. This guy doesn't seem to be hindered by the ice and fire energies. Above the clouds, The people sitting around the round table burst into an uproar. This time, Yang Yi was far ahead of the others. The second place, Fu Yu, was only on the 11th floor, and his speed was constantly decreasing. Perhaps his limit was the 12th floor. Jianmu and Ding Xingho were on the 10th floor, 3rd and 4th respectively. There were 4 people on the 9th floor. Among them, Su Lingping of the Hidden Sword Peak, Xian Qi of the Mysterious Underworld Peak, and Mu Qinxue of the Sky Capital Peak were all on the 9th floor. The 4th person was a girl named Gatha. This name was extremely unfamiliar to the people at the round table. They had never heard of this disciple before. Shi Tianhua, this Gatha is from your Great Void Peak. Is she your new direct disciple? Old man Tiandu asked Shi Tianhua, who was dressed as a Taoist priest. Shi Tianhua smiled and said, I'm not talented. I just accepted her as a direct disciple half a year ago. A direct disciple accepted half a year ago can actually reach the 9th floor of the Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Palace. Isn't this speed a little too fast? Shi Tianhua, it seems that you have accepted a good disciple. Her talent is almost on par with Mu Qinxue of the Sky Capital Peak. She might even surpass her master. At the round table, everyone's focus was suddenly on Gatha. Shi Tianhua, who was originally calm, could not help but smile. There was a trace of pride in his smile. Gatha's talent was even stronger than Ding Xingho of the Great Void Peak. It was only a matter of time before she surpassed Ding Xingho. Shi Tianhua was extremely glad that he had wandered around the bottom of the 9 peaks and found Gatha, this beautiful jade. He knew that as Gatha's cultivation increased in the future, she would definitely shine in the inner yard, and even the 9th netherworld realm. While everyone was discussing, Xiao Yu was dejected. The 2 direct disciples of Ao Yuan Peak, Zhuowen and Lu Qing, were behind the others. Lu Qing was still on the 8th floor, and Zhuowen was on the 7th floor. There was a big gap between them and the previous ones. Damn it! It seems that Ao Yuan Peak is going to be ranked last again. I'm afraid that those old guys will mock and ridicule us. Xiao Yu cursed in a low voice and sighed in his heart. However, he did not blame Zhuowen. Zhuowen had joined Ao Yuan Peak for too short a time. Even if he had the strength to kill an 8th-level Emperor Realm expert, there was still a gap between him and the top geniuses of the other main peaks. However, Xiao Yu believed that if Zhuowen was given enough time, he would naturally be able to catch up with the other direct disciples of the main peaks. As for Lu Qing, although he was considered a genius, he was only average compared to the other direct disciples. Xiao Yu did not think that Lu Qing would be able to surprise him. Since the 2 direct disciples were the kind that could not be helped, Xiao Yu's mood was very bad. The 9th floor was a huge platform. There was a scorching sun and snowstorm on the platform. The energy of ice and fire filled the air. If one accidentally breathed it into his lungs would be damaged. Su Lingping, who had a small sword on her waist, walked in front silently. Behind her was Xian Qi, followed by Mu Qinxue, and lastly Gatha. Mu Qinxue turned her head and looked at Gatha. Her beautiful eyes were filled with surprise. She naturally knew Gatha. She was the girl who had entered the inner courtyard with Zhuowen. This girl was the younger sister of the impulsive and reckless Jianan. Mu Qinxue did not pay much attention to this girl at that time. However, she had to be cautious now. At this moment, Gatha's cultivation was around the 4th level of the Emperor Realm. However, she was able to rely on her own strength to reach the 9th floor. This result had already surpassed most of the disciples in the inner courtyard. When she was about 10 meters away from Mu Qinxue, Gatha stopped. Her face was slightly pale. She sat down cross-legged and did not plan to go any further. Perhaps because she noticed Mu Qinxue looking at her, Gatha raised her head and smiled brightly at Mu Qinxue. She said, "Sister-in-law, you have to do your best." Mu Qinxue was stunned. Soon after, a warm smile appeared on her face. She nodded and said, "Thank you, Gatha. If you work harder, you might be able to reach the 10th floor." Gatha shook her head and said, "The 9th floor is my limit. It is unlikely that I will be able to reach the 10th floor. Sister-in-law, you should be able to do it. You overestimate yourself. How can a mere 7th level of the Emperor Realm reach the 10th floor?" Suddenly, A sinister voice rang out, causing Mu Qinshui to frown as she stared at the ruler in front of her. Noticing Mu Qinshui's gaze, Qianqi licked his lips and laughed. I heard that you are that bastard Zhuan's lover. What a waste. A beautiful flower stuck in cow dung. Shut your dog mouth, said Mu Qinshui coldly. Qianqi's face darkened. He said coldly, What did you just say? Do you dare say it again? I said shut your dog mouth. You are not qualified to comment on Zhuan, said Mu Qinshui coldly. The veins on Qianqi's forehead bulged. He said, I am not qualified to comment on Zhuan? Do you really think that he can be compared to me just because he killed an 8th level Emperor Realm piece of trash? If I was in front of him, I would be able to kill him with a single finger. You can kill an 8th level Emperor Realm expert as a 3rd level Emperor Realm expert? Said Mu Qinshui suddenly. Qianqi was stunned. It was difficult for a 3rd level Emperor Realm expert to kill an 8th level Emperor Realm expert. Now that he was a 9th level Emperor Realm expert, killing an 8th level Emperor Realm expert was like killing a dog. However, if he was in the 3rd level Emperor Realm, he wouldn't be able to kill an 8th level Emperor Realm expert no matter what. That's because Zhuan is lucky. He has an extremely powerful armor soul in his body. Without that armor soul he's nothing, retorted Qianqi coldly. So the dignified first personal disciple of the profound underworld peak, Qianqi, can also deny it. I have seen it today, said Mu Qinshui mockingly. You're courting death. Don't think that I won't dare to touch you just because you're a personal disciple of the profound underworld peak. Qianqi took a step forward. A terrifying aura flowed out. He continued, Today, I will teach you a lesson in the Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Palace. When we get out, I will personally teach that trash Zhuan a lesson. As he spoke, Qianqi leaped into the air, and with a powerful 1,000-pound fall, he flew towards Mu Qinshui. Chilling aura surged from Qianqi's hand as it transformed into an icy longsword. Chapter 1369. Level 8-inch Be careful. Gatha, who was standing behind Mu Qinshui, exclaimed. She wanted to help, but she was powerless. She was only a level 4 emperor. She had reached the limit of the 9th level. She did not have any energy left to help Mu Qinshui. Mu Qinshui did not panic. She took out a bead from her spiritual ring. The surface of the bead was filled with a chilling aura. The aura was surrounded by the chilling power of the law of Yin. Boom! Qianqi's ice and snow longsword followed, ruthlessly slashing at Mu Qinshui. However, the latter raised her jade-like hand and held the bead horizontally in front of her. A cold power of law intertwined in front of her, repelling Qianqi's attack. Qianming bead. Qianqi's eyes narrowed when the ice longsword was deflected. He could not help but exclaim. His face turned ghastly pale. Mu Qinshui waved her hand. The law of Qianming and the Qianming bead turned into black ropes and shot toward Qianqi. Damn it! Qianqi twisted his waist and retreated. At the same time, he constantly swung the sword in his hand, blocking the ropes formed from the laws of mysterious underworld, in an extremely miserable manner. With a grunt, Qianqi's chest showed an opening. A black rope shot out and hit his chest. Qianqi spat out a mouthful of blood and fell to the ground. Mu Qinshui's eyes were filled with killing intent. She waved her hand again. The law of Qianming was relentless. It was like a black python that attacked Qianqi again. Qianqi's face changed. He pushed against the ground with his right hand and pulled out the giant ruler from his back. He swung it. A chilling energy shot out of the giant ruler and formed a terrifying Yin storm. Boom! 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 The Yin storm and the law of Qianming clashed. Qianqi's eyes twitched when he realized that the Yin storm did not last long. It was broken by the law of Qianming and continued to rush toward him. Bastard! That Zhuan actually gave the Qianming orb to you. Damn it! Qianqi retreated again and could not help but curse loudly. This mysterious nether orb was originally a protective item that Xianzhong had intended to give to him. He did not expect that he would be forced to give it to Zhuan. He also did not expect that Zhuan would give such a precious item to Mu Qinshui. After all, the law of mysterious underworld was a powerful treasure condensed by a half-saint using the power of law. It contained a part of Xianzhong's power. His Xian ruler was only at the 9th level of the monarch realm, and had yet to comprehend the power of law. Naturally, it was no match for the law of mysterious underworld. You're going too far. Xianqi roared angrily, and the center of his brows shone brightly. Then a giant ice giant appeared in front of him. The snow giant's entire body was covered in sparkling and translucent ice. At first glance, it looked as if it was wearing an armor of ice and snow. It was extremely mighty and extraordinary. Rumble! The snow giant suddenly punched out, and a terrifying power erupted. It actually repelled the law of mysterious underworld. At the same time, Xianqi leaped onto the snow giant and retreated continuously, out of the attack range of the mysterious nether orb. Mu Qinxue frowned slightly, but did not continue to pursue. Xianqi was the eldest direct disciple of the mysterious nether peak, and the snow giant should be the soul of his armor. Its power was extremely terrifying, as it could repel the law of mysterious underworld's attack. Moreover, the law of mysterious underworld in the mysterious nether orb would not last forever. It would be depleted every time it was used. After all, when Xianzhong refined it, he had injected his own law of mysterious underworld into the orb. It could not be used indefinitely, so Mu Qinxue would not waste it. Relying on the mysterious nether orb, what kind of ability is that? Moreover, this mysterious nether orb was originally given to me by my master. You and that bastard Zhuan schemed and stole it. Despicable and shameless. You should return it to me, Xianqi said coldly. Mu Qinxue's beautiful eyes were filled with indifference. She did not reply, but waved her jade-like hand. The law of mysterious underworld from the mysterious nether orb once again turned into a huge black python. The black python's pair of extremely cold eyes stared at Xianqi, causing the latter to feel a chill down his spine. His heart trembled slightly. Humph, you really don't know your place. Next time, I will make you hand over the mysterious nether orb voluntarily. Xianqi said ruthlessly, and walked towards the front of the platform embarrassedly. His speed was much faster, as if he was afraid that Mu Qinxue would catch up with him. You are bluffing. You are far inferior to Zhuan, Mu Qinxue said indifferently. As soon as she said that, Xianqi, who was in front of her, stopped. However, he did not reply and continued to walk forward, ignoring Mu Qinxue. Su Lingping, who was in the front, had already reached the edge of the platform. There was a staircase at the edge. Her eyes were extremely calm. She took a step forward, and disappeared from the platform. Damn it! The battle with Mu Qinxue just now has consumed too much of my energy. When he was about 10 meters away from the staircase, Xianqi stopped. His chest was heaving up and down. It was obvious that he had reached his limit. Xianqi's eyes flickered. In the end, he sat down cross-legged and stopped moving forward. Mu Qinxue reached the center of the platform and stopped. She shook her head slightly, knowing that she had also reached her limit. She followed Xianqi's example, and sat down on the same spot. She began to absorb the surrounding ice and fire energy, to refine the meridians in her body. Why is Zhuan not here yet? While she was cultivating, Mu Qinxue could not help but think of Zhuan. Based on her understanding of Zhuan, the latter's strength was definitely not weaker than hers. In fact, he might even be stronger than her. It should be more than enough for him to reach the 9th level. On the 7th level, Zhuan was still sitting cross-legged in front of the circular arc. His expression was extremely focused. His eyes were almost blurred as if he was in a daze. Perhaps the so-called balance point does not exist. Previously, when I merged the ice and fire energy, using the human-grade energy, it was in the shape of a sphere. When I merged the earth-grade energy, it was in the shape of a lotus. However, these two forms can only maintain a temporary stability. After a long time, the ice and fire energy will still explode. If I merge the two types of energy into an extremely stable form, does it mean that the ice and fire energy will not go berserk? Instead, I will be able to control them as I wish? Zhuan muttered softly. Based on his previous experience of merging the ice and fire energy, a look of understanding gradually appeared in his eyes. However, what kind of form can completely stabilize the ice and fire energy? Zhuan's eyes were filled with confusion. His gaze fell on the surroundings as he softly said, "How can the ice and fire energy in the ice and fire dual polarity palace merge together so harmoniously? Could it be?" Suddenly, a look of understanding appeared in Zhuowen's eyes. Soon after, the 9 flames karmic fire and the dark cold poison appeared in his hands again. At the same time, his mental energy in his Naiwan palace controlled the form of the 2 types of energy. Under the control of his mental energy, the 9 flames karmic fire in his right hand turned into half a palace, while the dark cold poison in his left hand turned into half a palace. Afterwards, Zhuowen slowly merged the 2 types of energy. In the end, they formed a complete palace. The shape of the palace was the same as the ice and fire dual polarity palace. As expected, the structure of the ice and fire dual polarity palace can actually allow the berserk ice and fire energy to exist harmoniously. A smile appeared on Zhuowen's lips. Furthermore, the smile became wider and wider. In the end, he laughed heartily at the sky. He had finally completely merged the 9 flames karmic fire and the dark cold poison. Furthermore, the energy that had been merged this time was completely under his control. In Zhuowen's palm, a small ice and fire dual polarity palace bloomed with the radiance of ice and fire. The 9 colors constantly alternated, accompanied by a chilling black color. This unconventional ice and fire dual polarity palace appeared very mysterious. "Kid, you're amazing. You actually managed to completely merge the 9 flames karmic fire and the dark cold poison by yourself." Xiao He could not help but exclaim in his mind. This was because Zhuowen did not use the ice and fire holy talisman in his hands to merge the 2 types of energy. Instead, he used his mental energy as a mediator to merge the 2 types of energy into the ice and fire dual polarity palace. Zhuowen was stunned. Only now did he realize that when he merged the dark cold poison and the 9 flames karmic fire earlier, he had surprisingly not used the ice and fire holy talisman's control. Instead, he had completely merged the 2 types of powerful energy by himself. This, Zhuowen muttered to himself in disbelief. "Haha, you're right. The ice and fire dual polarity palace is the most stable structure. It can carry the energy of ice and fire at the same time without causing an explosion." Speaking of which, the guy who built the ice and fire dual polarity palace back then was really amazing to be able to comprehend such a stable structure and suppress the ice and fire holy talisman. Xiao He could not help but nod. Her tone was full of admiration for the creator of the ice and fire dual polarity palace. "It's really amazing." Zhuowen also nodded. If he had not been inspired by the ice and fire dual polarity palace, he would never have thought of using such a form to stabilize the energy of ice and fire. Since I can merge the energy of ice and fire, does it mean that the ice and fire holy talisman will not be of much use to me in the future? Zhuowen asked with a frown. Xiao He shook her head and said, "The ice and fire holy talisman is a treasure of heaven and earth. To tell you the truth, there are both the law of ice and the law of fire in the ice and fire holy talisman. If you have the real body of the holy talisman, you will be able to easily control the power of these 2 laws without needing to comprehend them. In other words, if you have the ice and fire holy talisman now, you will have the battle strength of an unrivaled emperor lord. Even an ordinary sage-to-be may not be your match. Of course, if you really advance to a saint, you will be able to completely control the power of the holy talisman. At that time, the power you will be able to display will be the most terrifying." Hiss. Hearing this, Zhuowen could not help but gasp. He did not expect the real body of the ice and fire holy talisman to be so powerful. If he had it, he would be able to directly control the 2 laws of ice and fire. Even if he was only a 5th level emperor realm now, with the ice and fire holy talisman, he would have the battle strength of an unrivaled emperor lord. After recovering from the shock, Zhuowen's eyes were filled with passion. Zhuowen was even more eager to obtain such an item. Let's go to the 8th floor. Chapter 1370. Ice and Fire Dragon. The only thing on the 8th level was a mountain. The top of the mountain was covered with snow, while the bottom was filled with blazing flames. It was like a combination of ice and fire. Climb to the top of the Ice and Fire Mountain range. The moment Zhuowen entered the 8th level, a deep voice rang in his ears. It was the talisman spirit's voice. Zhuowen did not answer. He stepped forward and climbed to the top of the Ice and Fire Mountain range. With Zhuowen's current strength, it was not difficult for him to climb to the top of the Ice and Fire Mountain range. After about an hour, Zhuowen stood at the top of the Ice and Fire Mountain range. Zhuowen looked into the distance and found that the Ice and Fire Mountain range was surrounded by a pitch-black space. He could not see what was hidden in this pitch-black space. "I've reached the top of the mountain." Zhuowen stood at the top of the mountain and shouted. His voice was like thunder, echoing over the entire mountain range. "Young man, you did not disappoint me. You came to Jiaxin College in 10 years and entered the Ice and Fire Dual Pole Palace. I did not expect that a little boy in the Yin Void realm could reach the level 5 Emperor realm in 10 years. You are very talented." A deep and vicissitude voice slowly rang out over the mountain range. It was like an echo that reverberated over the Ice and Fire Mountain range. "Come, follow my guidance, and enter the 18th level. Over there, you will be able to obtain my true body, and you will also be able to obtain supreme power." As soon as the voice fell, Zhuowen's pupils shrank. The Ice and Fire Mountain range under his feet shook violently and then collapsed. From the ruins of the mountain range, a huge Ice and Fire dragon drilled out. The Ice and Fire dragon was extremely large. Its size was comparable to Xiaohei's. It had a dragon body that was tens of thousands of feet long. The energy of ice and fire intertwined in its body, and the colors of red and blue were constantly changing. "Young man, follow my guidance." The symbol spirit's voice rang out once again. Zhuowen leaped into the air, and the power of the void filled his feet as he entered the void. In the next instant, he appeared above the head of the Ice-Fire Dragon. The Ice and Fire Dragon's head had 2 dragon horns, one red and the other ice blue. "Owa!" The huge Ice-Fire Dragon roared at the sky. Immediately, it brought Zhuowen and rushed into the sky. In an instant it disappeared from the 8th level. A monstrous dragon roar spread across the entire Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Hall. Gatha, Mu Qinxue and Xianqi, who were originally seated on the platform on the 9th level, were suddenly woken up. Soon after, the 3 of them were stunned to discover that an enormous Ice and Fire Dragon had appeared in the sky above their heads. "What is this?" Xianqi was startled and muttered to himself in astonishment. "There's a figure on the dragon head. Is that Big Brother Zhuowen?" Gatha suddenly exclaimed and pointed in the direction of the dragon's head. Mu Qinxue and Xianqi followed Gatha's finger and saw a figure standing there. Perhaps because he heard Gatha's shout, the figure standing on the dragon's head turned his head to look down, revealing a rather delicate and pretty face. "It's Zhuowen." Mu Qinxue was also pleasantly surprised. She did not expect Zhuowen to summon a huge dragon and rush into the 9th level. Moreover, looking at the speed of the huge Ice-Fire Dragon, it only took an instant for it to reach the end of the 9th level and disappear from the stairs. "So fast," Gatha muttered softly. Xianqi's face was a little ugly. He did not expect Zhuowen to have also entered the 9th level. Moreover, Zhuowen's speed was so fast. He did not even stop as he stood on the Ice-Fire Giant Dragon and directly passed through the 9th level. "Xianqi, it seems like you are really not as good as Zhuowen," Mu Qinxue said to Xianqi with a sweet smile. Xianqi snorted and said, "Humph. The one who passed through the 9th level is the huge dragon that the brat is sitting on, and not his own strength. He is lucky this time. After leaving the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Palace, I will make him reveal his true colors." Mu Qinxue only smiled and did not say anything. She was very clear that it was useless to say anything to Xianqi, so she was too lazy to say anything. Qinxue and Gatha are both on the 9th level. It seems like that is their limit. The huge Ice-Fire Dragon was very fast. It only stopped on the 9th level for a moment before it entered the 10th level without slowing down. There were a total of 3 figures on the 10th level. They were Su Lingping, who had just entered the 10th level from the 9th level, Jianmu, and Ding Xinghao. When the huge Ice-Fire Dragon barged into the 10th level, it immediately attracted the attention of the 3 people. Su Lingping and Ding Xinghe were stunned. Jianmu stared at the figure on the huge ice fire dragon and muttered in a low voice, "It's actually Zhuowen." That guy is Zhuowen, the direct disciple of Ao Yuan Peak, who has recently become famous in the inner court? As soon as Jianmu finished speaking, Ding Xinghe and Su Lingping looked at each other with a strange look in their eyes. The two of them had naturally heard of Zhuowen's name. They naturally knew about what happened at Sky Capital Peak more than half a year ago. After all, the people from the Blue Dragon Hall and the battle between the inner court's Dean Yinji and Sapphire Shore's Law Clone had shaken the entire Divine Spectre realm. And all of this was related to a disciple called Zhuowen. So many disciples of the Nine Peaks had heard of Zhuowen's name, but had never seen his face. On the huge ice fire dragon, Zhuowen only glanced at Jianmu and the other two indifferently. The huge ice fire dragon rushed out and disappeared from the 10th level, entering the 11th level. Damn it, I definitely can't lose to Zhuowen. Jianmu's eyes were filled with determination. Then, the long sword on his back was unsheathed and turned into a few feet long. He stepped on the long sword and a ruthless law enveloped his body. Jianmu turned into a sword light and entered the 11th level like a hot knife through butter. Jianmu still has strength left. What a freak. Ding Xinghe stared blankly at Jianmu, who had turned into a sword light and disappeared from the 10th level. He was stunned on the spot. When he recalled that he had planned to compete with Jianmu, but was instantly left behind by the latter, he felt a chill in his heart. At the same time, he felt a sense of shame for being deceived. Jianmu had entered the 10th level with him and hadn't used his full strength at all. It was too despicable. In the sky above the 11th level, Zhuowen, who was standing on the huge ice fire dragon, seemed to have noticed something. He bent down and immediately saw Jianmu chasing him on a flying sword. Jianmu. Looking at Jianmu, who was chasing him, Zhuowen was speechless. He didn't know that this guy was chasing him like a madman. With the speed of the huge ice fire dragon, it was impossible for Jianmu to keep up. At most, Jianmu wouldn't be able to keep up with him on the 12th level. Therefore, Zhuowen didn't take it to heart. Sure enough, after entering the 12th level, Jianmu's speed dropped sharply. The terrifying ice fire energy in the surroundings was like the pressure of the deep sea, pressing down on Jianmu, causing his body to become heavier. Looking at the huge ice fire dragon that had disappeared into the 12th level without slowing down, Jianmu finally stopped. At this moment, his face was pale, and there was a trace of unwillingness in his eyes. Am I really not as good as Zhuowen? Jianmu muttered to himself dejectedly. The ruthlessness in his eyes grew stronger. He needed power, more power. Above the clouds, a group of people sat around a round table. Their gazes were constantly on the light screen on the round table. Xianqi stopped at the 9th level. Xianzhong muttered as he frowned. Xianzhong frowned as he muttered to himself. Obviously, he was not very satisfied with Xianqi's results. Yang Yi has entered the 16th level. This guy's speed has finally slowed down. I'm afraid the 17th level is his limit. Yanji suddenly stared at the first light spot with bright eyes. Old man Tian, Du was grinning from ear to ear. In the eyes of the other 8 peak masters, there was a trace of mockery in his smile. It was extremely annoying. It's already amazing to reach the 16th level. In the Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Palace, the limit is the 17th level. The 18th level is the level where the Ice Fire Saint symbol is located. That is the most terrifying level. Even a half-step saint will probably die there. Wenbai said solemnly. The 18th level is too terrifying. Usually, only the 3 martial granduncles can enter that level. Even the 9 of us can't reach it. Old man Tian Du nodded in agreement. Why did Zhuowen's speed suddenly increase? Great Void Peak Master Shi Tianhua suddenly asked in surprise. His voice was like a stone falling into the water, causing a series of ripples. Everyone's eyes fell on Zhuowen's light spot, and then they all revealed a look of astonishment. Just as Shi Tianhua said, Zhuowen's speed had indeed increased, and it was somewhat unbelievably fast. Zhuowen, who was originally on the 8th level, entered the 9th level in 3 breaths, then the 10th, the 11th, the 12th, and finally the 13th level, where Fuyu was. He surpassed Fuyu. Zhuowen has entered the 14th level, and now he's only below Yang Yi. Moreover, Zhuowen's speed doesn't seem to have decreased because of this. Instead, it's maintained the same speed as before. How did he do it? The round table suddenly became quiet. Everyone's eyes were filled with disbelief. They really couldn't imagine how Zhuowen, who was originally at the back, suddenly became so fast, as if he had been injected with hormones. Zhuowen is approaching Yang Yi step by step. This guy. On the 13th level, Fuyu stared blankly at the ice-fire dragon that disappeared on the stairs in front of him. His body stiffened. Who is that guy? His speed is so fast that he surpassed me. Fuyu's expression turned extremely ugly. He had accepted the fact that he was surpassed by Yang Yi previously. However, he was now surpassed by another person. One could imagine how bad his mood was. What made him even more helpless was that Zhuowen was extremely unfamiliar to Fuyu. This was the first time he had seen the youth. Generally, he would recognize the geniuses in the inner yard, but he had never seen the young man riding the ice-fire dragon before. Obviously, that young man was not famous in the inner yard. I was surpassed by a nameless person. Damn it! Fuyu coldly snorted and destructive power lingered around his body. His muscles began to bulge, and he was filled with the power of a wild beast. Let's go. Chapter 1371. Yang Yi. The 16th level was a vertical flight of stone stairs. The surface of the stone stairs was filled with ice and fire energy. The power produced by this level of ice and fire energy was extremely terrifying. The surrounding air was alternating between hot and cold. The two types of energy intertwined with each other like countless insects. If one was not careful, the ice and fire energy in the air could invade one's acupuncture points and enter one's body, destroying the most important meridians in one's body. If one was not strong enough, an ordinary cultivator would not be able to stay here for long. They would be burned to death by this energy. A figure was lazily lying in the middle of the stone stairs. His eyes were drowsy as he yawned without a care for his image. It's already the 16th level. This ice and fire dual polarity palace is truly extraordinary. The ice and fire energy on the 16th level is terrifying. Fortunately, I have practiced the air-holding skill, and do not need to breathe. I will not be corroded by the ice and fire energy here. Yang Yi hugged his head with both hands as he lay on one of the stone stairs. His eyes narrowed as he continued. It's the 16th level. No one should be able to reach here. Even Fuyu should not be able to. Looks like it was really easy to get first place. Yang Yi shook his head as he spoke. A lonely expression appeared on his face as he said, "Life is so lonely. It's really boring to always be first place. Why don't I go down and play with Fuyu?" "Forget it. It's too tiring to go down. I'll just lie here and sleep for a while. If Fuyu is not here by the time I wake up, I'll look for him again." After speaking, Yang Yi twisted his body slightly and changed into a better sleeping position. He planned to fall asleep. Swoosh! A wild sonic boom suddenly resounded on the 16th level. Following it was a thunderous dragon roar. Yang Yi, who had originally planned to close his eyes and sleep, twitched his ears. He abruptly stood up and lowered his head. He was stunned to see an enormous ice and fire dragon rushing up the stone steps below. Its speed was so fast that it was shocking to hear. At the same time, a slender figure stood on the enormous dragon's head. This person was Zhuowen. When Zhuowen saw Yang Yi, who was standing at the middle of the stone steps, a strange glint appeared in his eyes. This was already the 16th step. Even Zhuowen felt that the surrounding ice and fire energy was somewhat unbearable. If it weren't for the ice-fire dragon, Zhuowen believed that with his current strength, it would be difficult for him to enter the 16th floor. However, this person was able to stand on the 16th floor so openly. It was clear how terrifying this person's strength was. The eldest disciple of Sky Capital Peak, number 1 on the divine list, Yang Yi? Zhuowen muttered in a low voice. Naturally, Zhuowen had read the information regarding the personal disciples of the 9 peaks. Among them, the most famous one was Zhuowen. This person's talent was terrifying. and his hobby was sleeping. He basically slept all day, but his cultivation base was breaking through at an extremely fast speed. Everyone in the inner court was shocked. Even old man Tiandu, his master, found it unbelievable. Yang Yi grinned and said, "Not bad, kid. You actually made it to the 16th floor. By the way, what's your name?" Zhuowen calmly stared at Zhuowen and said indifferently, "Zhuowen. Zhuowen? So your name is Zhuowen. I've seen the battle at Sky Capital Peak. You're pretty strong, able to kill an 8th level emperor as a 3rd level emperor. You're the most talented person I've ever seen. Of course, there's still a gap between you and me." Yang Yi chuckled. He didn't blush at all when bragging about himself. "You flatter me." Zhuowen nodded. Immediately, the ice-fire dragon roared and rushed up the stone stairs. In 3 breaths' time, it had reached the middle of the stone stairs where Yang Yi was. "Zhuowen, how about we hitch a ride?" Yang Yi suddenly smiled. Immediately after, under Zhuowen's astonished gaze, he jumped up and landed on the dragon's back. Roar! Get lost! The ice-fire dragon roared and crazily twisted its huge body. A dull and angry voice came from the dragon's mouth. Yang Yi curled his lips and said, "Why are you so stingy? If you can carry Zhuowen, why can't you carry me? Your body is so big, it doesn't make much difference whether I'm there or not." As he spoke, Yang Yi's right hand turned into a claw and grabbed the dragon's body. He actually pried open the scales on the dragon's body and reached in with his other hand. He then pulled out a dragon tendon and held it in his hand. "Bastard! How dare you peel my dragon tendon? You're courting death." The ice-fire dragon roared furiously. The terrifying ice and fire energy on the dragon's body gathered together and instantly enveloped Yang Yi. "You have quite a temper." Yang Yi's lips curled into a smile. A destructive aura burst out from his right palm. Then he slammed his palm on the wound that had been there just now. Bang, bang, bang. Muffled noises resounded from within the dragon's body. Soon after, Zhuowen's expression changed drastically as he discovered that the ice-fire giant dragon was letting out a sharp roar. Immediately, the tail of the ice-fire giant dragon began to crumble, causing countless amounts of fresh blood to spray into the air. Boom! The ice-fire dragon's eyes were filled with resentment. The part of the dragon's body where Yang Yi was also exploded. The terrifying explosive energy instantly drowned Yang Yi. At the same time, the ice-fire dragon did not dare to stay here for long. With a twist of its body, it disappeared from the 16th floor. The 17th level was a boundless land. As soon as the ice-fire dragon appeared on the 17th level, it slammed into the ground. Zhuowen, who was originally standing on the dragon's head, released his celestial energy and floated in the air. At this moment, the ice-fire dragon was in a terrible state. Almost half of the dragon's body was covered in blood and flesh. Zhuowen could even see sections of dragon bones amidst the bloody flesh. It was extremely wretched. What terrifying strength! How can Yang Yi be so strong? Zhuowen's eyes flickered. The strength that Yang Yi had just displayed was much stronger than that of Xiaoyu, the peak master of Ao Yuan Peak. Moreover, the attack that Yang Yi had unleashed contained traces of destructive power. Yang Yi has mastered the law of destruction. It seems that he deliberately shot down the ice-fire dragon to stop you from moving forward. Xiao Hei's solemn voice sounded in Zhuowen's mind. The law of destruction. Zhuowen's eyes darkened. The law of destruction was an extremely powerful law. Although it could not be compared to the law of the void, it was much stronger than the ordinary law. Young man, it seems that the ice-fire dragon that I have transformed into won't be of much use. I will inject the energy of the ice-fire dragon into your body, so that you can smoothly pass through the 17th floor and reach the 18th floor where I am. The ice-fire dragon, which was prostrating on the ground, stared at Zhuowen and made a dull sound. Then, its huge dragon body began to dissipate, turning into extremely pure ice-fire energy and merging with the ice-fire sacred rune on the back of Zhuowen's hands. Keep moving forward. The dull sound was heard. Then, the ice-fire sacred rune on Zhuowen's hands bloomed with ice-fire energy, turning into an armor of alternating ice-fire and ice-fire that covered Zhuowen's body. Whoosh! Zhuowen nodded and began to run forward. Zhuowen found that with the ice-fire armor on the surface of his body, the ice-fire energy around him was almost non-existent. At the entrance of the 17th floor, a lazy figure slowly walked out. Yang Yi looked around and suddenly found Zhuowen running in front of him. A strange look appeared on his face. The ice-fire dragon's aura doesn't seem to belong to Zhuowen. It's more like an energy life form that was born in the ice-fire dual polarity palace. But why is this energy life form helping Zhuowen? Yang Yi's eyes showed a trace of seriousness for the first time. After all, Zhuowen's cultivation was only at the 5th Heaven Emperor realm. It was very strange that he could reach the 16th and 17th floor. Could it be that the ice-fire sacred rune is causing trouble? Yang Yi seemed to have thought of something. He squinted his eyes, and then took a step forward, rushing in the direction that Zhuowen was running. Yang Yi is catching up. Naturally, Zhuowen also heard the commotion behind him. From the corner of his eyes, he immediately saw Yang Yi approaching from behind. Junior Zhuowen, looking at you, it seems like something is helping you to reach the deepest part of the ice-fire dual polarity palace. Could it be that you have some kind of connection with the ice-fire sacred rune on the 18th floor? Yang Yi, who was following behind Zhuowen for tens of meters, suddenly said with a smile, causing Zhuowen's pupils to shrink into needles. Senior Yang Yi, I don't understand what you're talking about. Zhuowen turned a deaf ear to him. Huge purple lightning wings appeared on his back. At the same time, a surge of void energy was added to the lightning wings. In an instant, he escaped into the void. The next time he appeared, he was already 100 meters away. The void immortal scripture? But your void energy is still not up to par. You probably haven't fully comprehended the void laws. Your speed is not enough. Yang Yi smiled faintly. His speed instantly increased by a few times. He was still closing the distance between him and Zhuowen. However, when Yang Yi was about to reach Zhuowen, the energy of ice and fire on the 17th floor began to boil, and turned into countless ice-fire giants. Boom! 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 The ice-fire giants gathered together and attacked Yang Yi. In their eyes, Zhuowen was like air. They completely ignored him. It seems that the ice-fire sacred rune is helping you. You have to reach the 18th floor before Yang Yi. Xiao Hei's voice rang in Zhuowen's mind. Hearing this, Zhuowen nodded. Haha, it's really the ice-fire sacred rune. Do you think these can stop me? Yang Yi laughed. There was a trace of excitement in his eyes. He slammed his right hand on the ground. With him as the center, the destruction law spread out. Wherever it passed, the ice-fire giants were destroyed. However, there were too many ice-fire giants. Even though the destruction law Yang Yi displayed was very powerful, it was difficult to destroy the ice-fire giants in a short time. Chapter 1372. The 18th Floor. At the same time, the ice-fire saint rune on the back of Zhuowen's hands began to emit dazzling light. The two colors, one red and one blue, illuminated Zhuowen's face, making it look quite strange. The 18th floor. Raising his head slightly, Zhuowen stared at the 18th floor with a touch of passion in his eyes. He could feel a voice calling him up. He knew that it was the real Ice-Fire Saint rune. Boy, be careful. The Ice-Fire Saint rune is very intelligent, and has lived much longer than you. Xiao Hei's voice suddenly sounded in Zhuowen's mind. Zhuowen narrowed his eyes and became sober. Although he had made a 10-year promise with the rune did not specify why he wanted him to enter the 18th floor. Was it really to let him obtain the real Ice-Fire Saint rune? Zhuowen was only in the Yin Void realm at that time. He was too weak and full of uncertainty, but the rune chose him. Was it really because he thought highly of him? I know, but I have to go in and take a look. The real Ice-Fire Saint rune is a treasure of heaven and earth. If I miss this opportunity, I'm afraid I won't have another chance. Zhuowen's eyes were filled with determination. He took a step forward and stepped onto the stairs. The Ice-Fire Saint rune on the back of his hands emitted an even more dazzling light. Boom! 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 The moment Zhuowen stepped onto the stairs, a terrible explosion came from the 17th floor. Earth explosion and sky rend. An indifferent voice resounded throughout the 17th floor. Then Zhuowen, who was about to step onto the stairs, froze. Immediately, he felt a terrible aura of destruction spread throughout the 17th floor. Next, the countless ice and fire giants formed from ice and fire energy on the 17th floor were annihilated into nothingness by this terrifying destructive power, disappearing without a trace. The terrible air billows, like a monstrous tsunami, spread in all directions. The ear-piercing sound of tearing cloth spread throughout the 17th floor. In the center of the air billows, a figure stood quietly. This person was surrounded by black and red lightning formed by the law of destruction. The lightning was full of a destructive aura. Yang Yi shook his head and said indifferently, "I said that these ice-fire giants can't stop me." After saying this, Yang Yi turned to look at Zhuowen, who was standing stiffly on the stairs to the 18th floor. He grinned and said, "Junior brother Zhuowen, although I don't know why the Ice-Fire Saint Rune is helping you, I'm sure I'm Fire Saint Rune." As he spoke, Yang Yi extended his right hand into the void. The destructive lightning that was dissipating around his body tore through the void and appeared in front of Zhuo when in an instant. Damn it! Zhuowen's rune. Run was Run's runs. Rumble. The golden feather emitted a blazing golden light and turned into a thick golden barrier in front of Zhuowen. Then, the destructive lightning arrived in an instant and blasted heavily on the golden barrier. Countless arcs of electricity spread out and looked exceptionally terrifying. Go! The moment he blocked the destructive lightning, Zhuowen immediately escaped into the void and teleported to the end of the stairs. He took a step and disappeared from the 17th floor. That golden feather isn't bad. It was actually able to block the lightning formed by my destruction laws. Yang Yi narrowed his eyes. At this moment, he had also reached the bottom of the stairs. Without any hesitation, he stepped onto the stairs and walked up step by step until he reached the end of the stairs. Just as he was about to enter the 18th floor, a terrifying energy of ice and fire surged over, instantly sealing the entrance to the 18th floor. Yang Yi took a few steps back. He was stunned. What was going on? Zhuowen could enter the 18th floor, but he couldn't? Thinking of this, Yang Yi had the urge to curse. This was too unfair. Break for me. Yang Yi snorted coldly. He clenched his right hand and destructive lightning filled it. Then, he punched the entrance to the 18th floor that was sealed by the energy of ice and fire. Rumble. A terrifying explosion resounded. Then, Yang Yi's face turned ugly. The energy of ice and fire that sealed the entrance to the 18th floor was more terrifying and powerful than that of the 17th floor. Even if he used the destruction laws, it was difficult to destroy it. Isn't this Ice-Fire Saint talisman too much? Why is there such a difference in treatment? Yang Yi's eyes widened, and he couldn't help but curse. But soon he frowned slightly. He found that the ice and fire dual polarity palace was too strange today. It seemed to be giving Zhuowen too special treatment. Only the 3 martial granduncles have entered the 18th floor. Even the 9 peak masters have only entered the 17th floor. Is the 18th floor so strange? Yang Yi frowned slightly and muttered in a low voice. He continued, could it be that Zhuowen has some kind of relationship with the Ice-Fire Saint talisman? Otherwise, why would the Ice-Fire Saint talisman be so crazy? Above the clouds, the people gathered around the round table were all dumbfounded as they stared blankly at the light screen on the round table. Zhuowen was like a hot knife through butter. After surpassing Fuyu, he directly entered the 16th floor, and then the 17th floor. During this period, Zhuowen and Yang Yi chased each other. In the end, the light that represented Zhuowen entered the 18th floor, which was the last floor of the ice and fire dual polarity palace. Zhuowen has entered the 18th floor? Old man Tiandu opened his mouth, but could only utter these words in the end. He had never expected that someone could surpass Yang Yi, nor did he expect that among the disciples of the ice and fire dual polarity palace, there would be someone who could enter the 18th floor. In the entire inner courtyard, only the 3 saints, Yin Ji, Jiang Xian and Wen Bai, had entered the 18th floor. None of the 9 peak masters had entered. The expressions of the others were extremely interesting, especially Xian Zhong. At the beginning, he had mocked Zhuowen for being last. Now, Zhuowen's performance was like a slap to his face. Moreover, it was a resounding slap. Haha. Look, Zhuowen is a direct disciple of my mysterious origin peak. A direct disciple taught by this old man. Which dog said that our mysterious origin peak would be ranked last? Hurry up and stand up for me. Xiao Yu laughed heartily, his face full of pride. At the same time, he narrowed his eyes and looked at Xianzhong provocatively. Obviously, Xiao Yu's words were directed at Xianzhong. Xiao Yu, what do you mean? How dare you insult me by calling me a dog? Xianzhong's face turned ugly as he slammed the table and stood up. Xiao Yu's words were really unpleasant, and he naturally could not tolerate it. Oh, Xianzhong, I don't think I was talking about you, right? I was just talking about a dog. I was talking about a dog, not a person. Why are you in such a hurry to admit it? It's rare for you to be so self-aware. I am quite pleased. Xiao Yu said sarcastically. Xiao Yu's words were too despicable. Not only Xianzhong, but also the others at the round table almost could not control their hands, and wanted to go up and beat him up. You are courting death. Xianzhong shouted angrily. The law of mysterious underworld burst out as he glared at Xiao Yu, as if he was ready to attack at any time. If you want to fight, I will accompany you. Xiao Yu was not to be outdone. The law of fire gushed out, and a huge fire python circled around his body. His aura was imposing. Both of you get some rest. Yan Ji felt a headache coming on as he shouted for them to stop. This caused Xianzhong and Xiao Yu, who had originally intended to fight, to immediately give up, not daring to say anything else. Humph! That Zhuowen must have used some unknown method to enter the 18th floor. If he fights with Xianqi, he will be defeated immediately. Xianzhong said coldly. Xiao Yu narrowed his eyes and said indifferently, Xianzhong, don't you feel ashamed? Xianqi is a 9th-level emperor, and he is about to comprehend the law and become an invincible emperor lord. Zhuowen is only a middle-level emperor. How dare you say that you want the two of them to fight? If Zhuowen is also a 9th-level emperor, I don't mind letting Zhuowen fight with Xianqi at that time. Zhuowen will definitely be able to defeat Xianqi, Xianzhong sneered and said. Looking at you, I'm afraid you don't dare to let Zhuowen fight with Xianqi. Are you planning to let Zhuowen be a coward? Enough you two. Let's talk after the result of the Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Palace. What's the use of talking now? Yanji's face was gloomy and his tone was heavy. Xianzhong and Xiao Yu, who were originally at loggerheads, stopped talking. On the 18th floor, Zhuowen slowly opened his eyes and looked around. He found that the surroundings were pitch black. However, the darkness was quickly broken. In front of Zhuowen, a ray of dim light appeared, like a ghost fire in a graveyard at night. This ray of dim light became brighter and brighter. In the end, it spread out and illuminated an area of dozens of feet, covering where Zhuowen was. That's a talisman? Zhuowen squinted his eyes and immediately saw the true appearance of the unknown object. It was a talisman with strange runes carved on its surface. The runes on the talisman were exactly the same as the Ice-Fire Saint talisman on the back of Zhuowen's hands. Could this be the real body of the Ice-Fire Saint talisman? Zhuowen was surprised. The talisman in front of him was very different from the real body of the Ice-Fire Saint talisman in his imagination. He originally thought that the real body of the Ice-Fire Saint talisman would be filled with extremely terrifying energy of ice and fire. But now the real body of the Ice-Fire Saint talisman in front of him was ordinary. He couldn't feel a trace of ice and fire aura at all. It was plain and simple, as if it was just an ordinary talisman. The only highlight was the dim light on its surface. Zhuowen walked forward step by step. When he took 10 steps, he was shocked to find that there was an iron fence made of black iron in front of him. He was blocked outside, and couldn't get close to the real body of the Ice-Fire Saint talisman. Zhuowen found that the place where the Ice-Fire Saint talisman was located was a square cage. There was a strange confinement force in the cage that firmly imprisoned the Ice-Fire Saint talisman in the middle of the cage. Whoosh! Chapter 1373. Symbol Spirit. The holy ice flame rune trembled violently. Soon after, cold qi and flames intertwined and surged out, transforming into a human figure. The figure's facial features were blurry, and its entire body was made of ice and fire. The figure's eyes were extremely strange. Its left eye was fiery red, and seemed to be flowing with magma, while its right eye was icy blue, and seemed to be filled with ice and snow. The symbol spirit of the holy ice flame rune? Zhuowen stood quietly outside the cage, and stared at the figure as he asked doubtfully. The figure looked straight at Zhuowen, and spoke in an ancient voice. "Young man, you're finally here. You didn't disappoint me. You've come as promised. Since I've come as promised, will you hand over the holy ice flame rune to me?" Zhuowen asked calmly. The symbol spirit was taken aback. Soon after, it chuckled and said, "The holy ice flame rune will naturally be handed over to you. However, my body is imprisoned in the ice and fire polarity hall. If you want to obtain me, you must first break the imprisonment of the ice and fire polarity hall." "Break the imprisonment?" Zhuowen furrowed his brows and continued. "At that time, will you really let me control the holy ice flame rune? Young man, don't you believe me? The holy ice flame rune is a treasure of heaven and earth. It cannot exist independently in this world. It must be controlled by someone. If you release me, I will naturally have to rely on you," the symbol spirit said indifferently. Zhuowen's eyes flickered. He sent a sound transmission to Xiao He in his sea of consciousness. "Xiao He, is the symbol spirit right? Can the holy rune only exist by relying on someone else? Indeed, if the holy ice flame rune wants to leave this world, it must rely on an expert to display its great power. Otherwise, if it exists alone in this world, it will be easily discovered by other experts and captured. However, I'm puzzled as to why the holy ice flame rune was suppressed by the master of the ice and fire polarity hall instead of relying on him," Xiao He said doubtfully. Upon hearing this, Zhuowen nodded his head and explained Xiao He's intentions to the symbol spirit. The latter gave a self-deprecating laugh and said, "The master of the ice and fire dual polarity hall is imprisoning me to benefit the entire excellent divine academy. My ice and fire energy can temper a martial artist's meridians and increase their cultivation speed. It is because of the ice and fire dual polarity palace that excellent divine academy is able to produce batch after batch of elite disciples. They are even faintly catching up to Blue Dragon Hall." "I see," Zhuowen muttered in a low voice. Soon after, he raised his head and said, "Then tell me how to break out of this cage." The talisman spirit smiled and said, "It's very simple. There's an altar on the left side of the cage. You just have to inject your energy into it to activate the altar. Then the confinement force of the cage will break, and I'll be able to come out. So simple." Zhuowen frowned and asked in surprise, "How complicated do you want it to be?" The talisman spirit shrugged. "Then I'll give it a try." As he spoke, Zhuowen slowly walked to the left. When he reached the end, there was indeed an altar made of white jade on the wall at the end of the corridor. "You just have to place your hand on the altar." The symbol spirit's gentle voice sounded. There was a trace of confusion in it. At the same time, a strange smile appeared on the symbol spirit's lips. Furthermore, this smile grew wider and wider. "Kid, be careful. This altar is not simple. Don't be fooled by the symbol spirit. I'm afraid that half of its words are false." Black's voice suddenly rang out in Zhuowen's mind, causing Zhuowen, who was about to place his hand on the altar, to stiffen. His right hand also stopped in midair. "Go in." The moment Zhuowen's body stopped, a cold voice suddenly sounded from behind him. Then, a claw filled with ice and fire energy grabbed Zhuowen's right hand and violently pressed it against the altar. Zhuowen's pupil shrank. He quickly turned around and saw that the symbol spirit, which was originally in the cage, had unknowingly appeared behind him. It was as if the symbol spirit was the owner of the palm. "You're wondering how I was able to escape from the cage, right?" The symbol spirit stared at Zhuowen, as the smile on its face grew increasingly strange. "Haha, it's because of the ice-fire holy symbol's origin in your body. That origin is a seed that I sowed. Now is the time for it to bloom. Young man, don't worry. I will grant you supreme power that will allow you to possess the power of a saint. However, the prerequisite is that you must give your body to me. As soon as the symbol spirit finished speaking, Zhuowen's pupils shrank to the size of needles. A word suddenly appeared in his mind. Possession. The symbol spirit wanted to possess his body. Whoosh! At the same time, a terrifying suction force came from the altar. Then, Zhuowen felt a throbbing from the depths of his soul. This suction force was directed at his soul, and wanted to pull it out. Bastard! Zhuowen cursed angrily, as he tried his best to resist the suction force. He did not expect that the symbol spirit had set a trap for him, and had been planning for this day's events for a long time. How dare a mere symbol spirit of the ice-fire holy symbol plot against me? Die! A black ray of light shot out from between Zhuowen's brows as a dragon's roar reverberated across the sky. Blackie revealed his 10,000-foot-long dragon body, and with a swipe of his enormous dragon claws, he smashed towards the symbol spirit below. Hee. I already knew of your existence when I gave the ice-fire holy symbol's origin to this boy. You can't kill me, sacred dragon of extremity. The symbol spirit chuckled, and suddenly retreated into the cage. Its enormous dragon claw slammed into the surface of the cage, but was unable to shake it at all. What a strong cage! Why is it as hard as a rock? Xiao He glared and said in exasperation. To think that the mighty abyssal saint dragon would fall to such a state. How pathetic! If you were at your peak, you might be able to break this cage, but you won't be able to do so now. The symbol spirit chuckled. Mongrel fox, why aren't you coming out yet? When are you going to stop watching the show? Zhuowen's soul is about to be pulled out by that damned altar. Xiao He roared. I know. Why are you in such a hurry? A solemn voice sounded from Zhuowen's body. Then, Cheng Huang appeared above Zhuowen's head with the Fushi cauldron. It looked at the altar solemnly, and pressed down with its right hand. The Fushi cauldron spat out a blazing white light that enveloped the entire altar. Under the suppression of the white light, the terrifying suction force from the altar gradually weakened. The Fushi cauldron? The symbol spirit could not help but exclaim as it stared at Cheng Huang and the Fushi cauldron. Of course it's the Fushi cauldron. Why do you think I'm following this kid? It's mainly because he has something like the Fushi cauldron, Xiao He said indifferently. Zhuowen suddenly opened his eyes when the suction force of the altar weakened. He pulled back his right hand, which was originally placed on the altar. His expression was extremely ugly. He didn't expect to be tricked by the Icefire Holy Talisman in the end. So you've been tricking me from the beginning? Zhuowen turned his head and stared at the symbol spirit with an extremely unfriendly gaze. The symbol spirit frowned slightly. It had really miscalculated this time. It did not expect Zhuowen to have something like the Fushi cauldron. Hee. Did you think I was playing house by releasing that wisp of origin source? It's a pity that it fell short of success in the end. The symbol spirit shook its head regretfully. Since the matter had been exposed, the symbol spirit naturally would not continue to pretend, and simply shed all pretense of cordiality. Can't a symbol spirit only attach itself to a cultivator? How can it possess a cultivator's body? Zhuowen asked with a slight frown. Xiao He sneered and said, I'm afraid this guy in front of us is not a symbol spirit at all. No matter how intelligent a symbol spirit is, it can't be so cunning. Upon hearing this, the symbol spirit in the cage narrowed its eyes, and its expression became ugly. Not a symbol spirit? Zhuowen began to feel surprised. If the Icefire Holy Talisman in front of him was not a symbol spirit, then what could it be? A symbol spirit will not possess a cultivator's body. Even if it does, it will not be compatible with the human body at all. Only the nascent soul of a cultivator can possess a cultivator's body. This guy in front of us is not a symbol spirit, but someone's nascent soul, Xiao He said indifferently. The symbol spirit's eyes flickered, and it suddenly laughed. You're indeed the Saint Dragon of Abyss. You know a lot. But you're wrong about one thing. Even if I'm a symbol spirit, I'm still a nascent soul because I've merged with the Icefire Holy Talisman's symbol spirit. You've merged with the symbol spirit? But your plan has failed. I'm afraid it will be difficult for you to escape. Xiao He sneered. The symbol spirit shook its head, and a pair of strange eyes fell on Zhuowen. Then it said in a charming voice, Zhuowen, don't you want the Icefire Holy Talisman? Didn't you come all the way to find Divine Academy for the Ice Fire Holy Talisman? Now that the Ice Fire Holy Talisman is right in front of you, do you really want to miss it? This is a treasure of heaven and earth. It has unimaginable power. If you miss it this time, you won't have another chance. Zhuowen sneered and said, "It's better than being schemed against by you." With that, Zhuowen slowly retreated, intending to leave the 18th floor. But when he retreated to the entrance, he found that the entrance to the 18th floor had been sealed. "You sealed the entrance?" Zhuowen's eyes became extremely cold. It seemed that the symbol spirit did not intend to let him leave from the beginning. "Hee, you can't leave the 18th floor. This is my world." The symbol spirit laughed. Suddenly, the Ice Fire Holy Talisman, which was quietly suspended in the cage, began to surge with terrifying ice and fire energy that swept across the entire 18th floor. The ice and fire energy was like a tsunami that flooded the sky, drowning Zhuowen. In an instant, the originally quiet 18th level was enveloped by an extremely terrifying pressure. Zhuowen almost staggered from the pressure and knelt on the ground. Chapter 1374. Suppression. Through this trace of origin source, I can sense that you once collected mortal-ranked flames and cold chi, earth-ranked flames and cold chi. Even now, there are heaven-ranked flames and cold chi in this origin source. The heavens are truly helping me. The symbol spirit faced the sky and laughed heartily. Suddenly, the two terrifying energies of 9 flames karmic fire and dark frost poison emerged from its body. The symbol spirit then skillfully fused the two heaven-rank energies together. Boom! A huge ice-fire dragon appeared once again. This time, the ice-fire dragon's aura was much stronger than before. This was a powerful life form, formed from the combination of dark frost poison and 9 flames karmic fire. It probably already had the power of a saint. Roar! The ice-fire dragon raised its head and roared. Its steel-like dragon tail swept out and heavily bombarded the cage that trapped the ice-fire holy rune. Countless sparks splashed out, and the cage began to shake violently, as if there was an earthquake. The power of the ice-fire dragon formed from the combination of heaven-rank flames and cold chi is unimaginable. Young man, you've really helped me a lot. If I can escape this time, I won't kill you. I'll only take over your body. Moreover, I'll reappear in this world with your identity and lead you to glory. The symbol spirit was wild with joy. Its voice was full of arrogance, as if everything was under its control. Outside the cage, Zhuowen looked at the ice-fire dragon with an unsightly expression. The aura of the ice-fire dragon formed from the combination of dark frost poison and 9 flames karmic fire was too terrifying. It was far more powerful than the previous ice-fire dragon. Under the bombardment of the ice-fire dragon, the cage that trapped the symbol spirit shook violently and was on the verge of collapse. It probably wouldn't take long for the cage to collapse on its own. The ice and fire energy on the 18th floor was becoming more and more terrifying. Zhuowen took out his golden feather, and a golden light that was as blazing as the sun burst forth from the feather. It enveloped Zhuowen's body, resisting the ice and fire energy around him. However, the ice-fire energy was too powerful. Even with the defensive power of the golden feather, Zhuowen could only be trapped in place. He couldn't move forward, let alone stop the ice-fire dragon's attack. What should I do? Zhuowen furrowed his brows, feeling a little flustered. He had naturally experienced how terrifying the Ice-Fire Saint Talisman was. If the Ice-Fire Saint Talisman really escaped, Zhuowen wouldn't be able to subdue it. Brat, try and see if you can regain control of the dark cold poison and 9 flames karmic fire. You did not need the Ice-Fire Saint symbol to completely merge these two energies into the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Palace. If you can control them, you might be able to suppress the Ice-Fire Saint symbol. I'll help you restrain that Ice-Fire Dragon first. The rest is up to you. Xiao He suddenly said to Zhuowen. Soon after, he transformed into 100,000 feet large dragon and roared at the sky, after which, he rushed towards the large ice and fire dragon that was attacking the cage. Rung run rungawa. The ice and fire dragon roared as its eyes spewed fire. It charged over and attacked Xiao He in a frenzy. However, Xiaohei was not to be outdone. She let out a clear dragon roar and flew over as well. Boom! Boom! The two dragons collided with each other in an instant. The huge dragon's body was looming above the void like a dark cloud that covered the sky. Zhuowen looked up and could only see the tip of the iceberg of the battle between the two dragons. Brat! Hurry up and control the dark frost poison and 9 flames of karma. Xiaohei won't be able to last for long. He's no match for the Icefire Dragon, Cheng Huang said solemnly as he rode on the divine turtle and brought the Fushi cauldron to Zhuowen's side. I'll try my best. Zhuowen took a deep breath and communicated with the dark frost poison and 9 flames of karma on the Icefire Dragon's body. He wanted to separate the two. Then, Zhuowen realized that the Icefire Dragon's body, which was originally full of vigor, had stiffened and slowed down. Xiaohei seized the opportunity and slammed its claws on the Icefire Dragon's body, causing it to fall from the sky to the ground. What? This guy can activate the 9 flames of karma and dark frost poison without relying on the Icefire holy symbol? The rune's pupils shrank to the size of needles. She could not believe it. Just now, she had clearly sensed that the Icefire Dragon's body had slowed down under Zhuowen's communication with his mind. As a result, Xiaohei had found an opening and slammed it down from the sky. Good job. Zhuowen continued. Xiaohei's huge dragon eyes shone with excitement. She had not expected that Zhuowen would be able to regain control of the 9 flames of karma and dark frost poison without relying on the Icefire holy symbol. Zhuowen nodded and sat cross-legged on the ground. The mind power in his Naiwen palace surged out like thousands of tentacles toward the Icefire Dragon that had fallen to the ground. It was as if he wanted to forcibly separate the 9 flames of karma and dark frost poison from the dragon's body. Don't even think about it. The rune roared angrily. It used the Icefire holy symbol's powerful control over the flames and cold air of heaven and earth to prevent the 9 flames of karma and dark frost poison from separating from the Icefire Dragon. This was a competition for the control of the 9 flames karmic fire and the dark frost poison. Whoever was more skilled and could control the 2 types of heaven rank energy would win. Xiaohei roared and swooped down, launching a powerful and terrifying attack on the Icefire Dragon. Due to Zhuowen's interference, the Icefire Dragon's strength had decreased greatly. In the battle against Xiaohei, the Icefire Dragon could be said to be losing ground. Boom! The Icefire Dragon was once again slammed to the ground by Xiaohei. With a roar, the Icefire Dragon's body actually showed signs of collapsing. Zhuowen took advantage of this opportunity to immediately use his mind to separate the 2 energies on the Icefire Dragon's body. "Ci!" A strange sound rang out. The 9 flames karmic flame and dark cold poison on the surface of the ice and fire dragon started to peel off. Furthermore, the speed at which they were peeling off increased. Even though the talisman spirit tried its best to stop the stripping, it was of no use. Xiaohei was too sinister. While Zhuowen was stripping, she was still attacking the ice and fire dragon and harassing the talisman spirit's control of the 2 types of energy. "Give it to me," Zhuowen shouted. Immediately, the ice and fire dragon that had fallen to the ground roared at the sky. Soon after, its huge dragon body collapsed and turned into black cold air and 9 colored flames. They were the dark cold poison and the 9 flames of karma. Damn it, damn it. The talisman spirit let out a muffled groan and retreated a few steps. Its eyes were filled with shock and anger as it cursed repeatedly. It had clearly retrieved a trace of the ice flame saint talisman's origin left in Zhuo Jingwen's body, along with the 2 kinds of heaven rank energies. But now it had failed. The talisman spirit had never expected that Zhuowen would be able to control the 9 flames of karma and the dark cold poison without relying on the ice and fire holy symbol. How did he do it? The 9 flames of karma was the heavenly fire that Zhuowen had created by combining 9 types of earth fire. The dark cold poison was the cold air that Zhuowen had extracted from Mu Qinshua's body. Both of them were inextricably linked to Zhuowen. In addition, Zhuowen had not relied on the ice and fire holy symbol on the 7th floor of the ice and fire holy hall. He had combined the 9 flames of karma and the dark cold poison to form the ice and fire energy of the ice and fire holy hall. Therefore, it was not unreasonable that Zhuowen did not need to rely on the ice and fire holy symbol to separate the two types of energy. Kid, combine the two types of energy to form the ice and fire holy hall, and completely suppress the talisman spirit. If I am not wrong, the owner of the ice and fire holy hall built the ice and fire holy hall to suppress the talisman spirit. The ice and fire holy hall must be extremely effective against the talisman spirit. Xiaohe transmitted her voice to Zhuowen. Zhuowen narrowed his eyes and nodded. I will try. As he spoke, the mental energy in Zhuowen's Naiwen palace burst out and transformed into countless tentacles. They combined the 9 flames of karma and the dark cold poison into the shape of half of a palace. Then the two types of energy suddenly merged together. Instantly, a magnificent palace appeared in the void. The surface of the palace was mixed with 9 different colors. As the 9 colors intersected, a pitch-black cold air continuously circulated. It looked extremely strange. This kid can combine the two types of ice and fire energy without relying on the ice and fire holy symbol? How did he do it? The talisman spirit was stunned. However, when his gaze landed on the palace-shaped ice and fire energy above, the shock in his eyes became even more intense. The ice and fire holy hall? The talisman spirit cried out in alarm, a trace of fear in his eyes. As expected, the talisman spirit is afraid of the ice and fire holy hall. Perhaps this palace formed from the combination of the 9 flames of karma and the dark cold poison can really suppress the talisman spirit. Zhuowen's eyes brightened. He naturally noticed the fear in the talisman spirit's eyes. With a flip of his hand, the ice and fire holy hall shrunk to the size of a palm and entered the cage through the gap between the metal bars. No, get lost. The talisman spirit shrieked and continuously retreated. He raised his hands and terrifying ice and fire energy shot out from his body like a rain of arrows and shot towards the palace. Boom, boom, boom. However, the ice and fire holy hall formed from heaven-grade energy was far too terrifying in terms of defensive power and power. The talisman spirit's attack was unable to cause any damage to the palace. Swoosh! The ice and fire holy hall swept in front of the talisman spirit in an instant. Then, under the control of Zhuowen's mind, it expanded inch by inch, from the size of a palm to nearly 100 feet in size. The huge palace came crashing down from above like a towering mountain. The surrounding air was torn apart, and a terrifying hurricane swept up. No! Block it! The talisman spirit roared angrily. He raised his hands to the sky and slammed them at the bottom of the ice and fire holy hall. Waves of ice and fire energy gushed out and resisted the pressure of the palace. Rumble! Under the heavy pressure, the talisman spirit groaned and knelt on one knee on the ground. Suppress it! Chapter 1375. Ranking No. The seal spirit roared angrily. Then, the voice disappeared as the seal spirit was enveloped by the ice and fire dual polarity palace. Zhuowen waved his right hand, and the ice and fire palace shrank to the size of a palm and returned to the palm of Zhuowen's right hand. Through the window of the ice and fire palace, Zhuowen saw a human figure struggling and jumping in the ice and fire palace. It was the seal spirit. Perhaps sensing Zhuowen's spying, the seal spirit glared at him and said, "Young man, what's the use of trapping me? Without me, you can't control the ice and fire holy symbol. I'm the seal spirit of the ice and fire holy symbol." Bullshit, seal spirit of the ice and fire holy symbol. As long as the ice and fire holy symbol still exists, it can naturally produce a new seal spirit. Aren't you too stupid to threaten Zhuowen with this? Xiaohe returned to Xiaohe's dog form and looked down at the seal spirit in the ice and fire palace with a smirk. The seal spirit's eyes froze. Xiaohe was right. If the seal spirit died, the ice and fire holy symbol could naturally be reborn. After all, as long as the ice and fire holy symbol's origin was not destroyed, it was fine. The seal spirit of the ice and fire holy symbol in front of him was originally a nascent soul. For some reason, it had become the seal spirit of the ice and fire holy symbol. It could be said that the seal spirit in front of him was not the original seal spirit of the ice and fire holy symbol. Let me go, and I can teach you how to control the ice and fire holy symbol. The seal spirit immediately took a step back. Zhuowen, why don't you refine this guy directly? The ice and fire holy symbol is suppressed by the ice and fire dual polarity palace, so the seal spirit can't mobilize too much energy. That's why you were able to suppress it. Once an accident happens, this guy will be an extremely unstable factor. Xiaohe shook his head and said coldly. Zhuowen's heart trembled. Xiaohe was right. The seal spirit could not mobilize too much energy, because the ice and fire holy symbol was suppressed. In addition, he was lucky enough to comprehend the combination of the 9 flames karmic fire and the dark frost poison to create the ice fire palace. Only then was he able to suppress it. If the ice fire Saint rune on the 18th floor hadn't been suppressed, Zhuowen would have died immediately. There was no chance for him to survive. I can't let you live. Zhuowen did not hesitate. The ice and fire palace in his hand surged with extremely powerful ice and fire energy, enveloping the seal spirit within. He wanted to refine it and make it a part of the ice and fire palace. No, you'll regret it. You can't do that. Within the ice fire palace, the symbol spirit's excited cries rang out continuously. Zhuowen turned a deaf ear to it. The energy in his body surged to his ears, completely isolating the symbol spirit's voice. Then, he sat down cross-legged on the ground with the ice fire palace above his head, silently refining the symbol spirit. Time passed day by day. Soon half a month had passed. In the ice and fire dual extreme hall, many disciples could not withstand the ice and fire energy and left. As time passed, the number of people who came out gradually increased. On the 5th floor, Emil Lingtian slowly stood up. He gazed at his surroundings and muttered in a low voice, I've reached my limit. However, as promised, I've entered the 5th floor of the ice and fire dual extreme hall. Now I can learn the complete part of the heaven burial sword scripture. Emil Lingtian clenched his fists as he spoke. His cheeks were slightly red, and his eyes were filled with excitement. Then, he muttered in his heart, and left the ice and fire dual extreme hall. On the 7th floor, Qing Yin and Moyan Wuxiang looked at each other and smiled bitterly. They knew that they had reached their limit, and could not advance any further. Wuxiang, let's leave. If we continue to stay here, I'm afraid it will cause us permanent damage. Qing Yin said to Moyan Wuxiang, I wonder what floor Zhuowen will enter, and what his ranking will be this time. Moyan Wuxiang suddenly opened his mouth and asked. Qing Yin was startled. She immediately smiled and said, Don't worry. With Zhuowen's talent and strength, entering the top 20 is not a problem. He might even be able to enter the top 10. As for the final result, we'll know once we leave. Moyan Wuxiang nodded and said, Yes, let's leave. On the 9th floor, Gatha and Mu Qinxue left the ice and fire dual extreme hall after bidding farewell. Mu Qinxue and Xian Qi were still persevering. After all, the longer they persevered, the better the tempering effect on their bodies. When they returned to cultivate, it was very likely that they would break through the shackles and advance their cultivation. The disciples who had left the Ice Fire 2 Extreme Hall returned to their respective main peaks. However, they did not return to their own residences. Instead, they stood on the square of their respective main peaks and lifted their heads to stare at the Ice Fire 2 Extreme Hall without blinking. They wanted to see the final result of the Ice and Fire Duel Extreme Hall. Not only them, but many official disciples and nominal disciples at the bottom of the 9 peaks were also looking up at the sky. When the Ice and Fire Duel Extreme Hall was opened, the white mist that lingered above the middle of the 9 peaks had dissipated. Therefore, the bottom of the 9 peaks could clearly see the true appearance of the 9 peaks and the Ice and Fire Duel Extreme Hall. Although we don't know the final result and the specific situation of the Ice and Fire Duel Extreme Hall, we can still make a guess. The first place will definitely be between Yang Yi of Sky Capital Peak and Fu Yu of Divine Devil Peak. Aren't you talking nonsense? Yang Yi is first on the Divine ranking, and Fu Yu is second on the Divine ranking. The first place will not be between the two of them. Moreover, I believe that the first place will most likely be Yang Yi, and Fu Yu will be second. No one left. They stood quietly at the same spot, waiting for the result of the Ice and Fire Duel Extreme Hall. Although they knew that the process might take a few days, half a month, or even a month, they still waited. Some cultivation fanatics even sat cross-legged on the square. When they were bored, they would cultivate to pass the time. In the blink of an eye, another half a month had passed. The disciples of the Ice and Fire Duel Extreme Hall came out one after another. Most of them were the elite disciples of the various peaks. The pro-disciple of Ao Yuan Peak, Lu Qing, was one of these disciples. She was ranked 11th. At this point, no disciple of the Ice and Fire Duel Extreme Hall had appeared for a long time. This was because there were only 10 disciples left in the Ice and Fire Duel Extreme Hall. They were the top 10 disciples of the Ice and Fire Duel Extreme Hall. It seems that Zhuowen has entered the top 10. Moyan Wuxiang of Taishan Peak heaved a sigh of relief. Her beautiful eyes were filled with surprise and sadness. Yes, I wonder what Zhuowen's final ranking will be. Qing Yin, who was standing beside Moyan Wuxiang, nodded and replied, "Let's wait. The remaining 10 people should be out soon." Moyan Wuxiang smiled and said, "At this moment, the countless disciples who were paying attention to the final result of the Ice and Fire Duel Extreme Hall had cautious expressions. Moreover, there was also anticipation in their expressions. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. 2 ear-piercing sounds flew out from the Ice and Fire Duel Extreme Hall. Then, 2 figures appeared in front of everyone's eyes. The 2 figures were a man and a woman. The man was handsome and tall, while the woman was ordinary. It's Senior Ding Xingho and Gatha from the Great Void Peak? When the 2 of them appeared, everyone recognized their identities. Then there was an uproar. The 2 of them were both pro-disciples of the Great Void Peak. It was really unexpected that they had both entered the top 10. At the same time, the names of Ding Xingho and Gatha appeared above the clouds. Among them, Gatha was ranked 9th and Ding Xingho was ranked 10th. Only the top 10 could have their names engraved above the clouds. There are still 8 people left. The rest of the people had hopeful expressions. They all wanted to see the rankings of the next 8 people. After 3 days, another figure appeared. This person had a gloomy expression. It was Xianqi from the Xianming Peak. He was ranked 8th in the end. Xianqi turned his head and looked at the rankings above the clouds. His face immediately turned ugly. Originally, he had come for the top 3. He did not expect that his final ranking would be so low, especially when he was ranked behind Zhuowen and Mu Qinxue. This was really humiliating for him. After Xianqi, the 7th place was Mu Qinxue. Time gradually passed. The remaining warriors also came out. The 6th place was Yuan Wanhe, the 5th was Su Lingping, and the 4th was Jian Mu. At this moment, there were only 3 people left in the Ice and Fire Duel Extreme Hall. Everyone was familiar with these 3 people. 2 of them were Yang Yi and Fu Yu, who were ranked 1st and 2nd on the divine list. The other person was Zhuowen. What was controversial was that many disciples were surprised that Zhuowen could enter the top 3. They did not know whether it was luck or strength. His luck is pretty good. He can actually enter the top 3. It seems that the Ice and Fire Dragon helped Zhuowen a lot. On the Xianming Peak, Xianqi frowned slightly. He felt a little uncomfortable as he muttered in a low voice. The 1st and 2nd place should be produced from the 2 senior brothers, Yang Yi and Fu Yu. That Zhuowen's luck is pretty good, and should be the 3rd place this time around. I really don't know how a disciple who had just entered the inner academy managed to enter the top 3. Discussions broke out in the surroundings. The most controversial one was naturally Zhuowen. Zhuowen had previously caused a sensation in the inner yard. It was the matter of the Blue Dragon Hall coming to ask for him. It had even caused the 3 saints of the inner yard to come out. It took a long time for the top 3 to come out. After another month, the figure of the 3rd person slowly emerged from the Ice and Fire Duel Extreme Hall. The figure in the light pillar firmly attracted everyone's attention. When they saw the true face of the 3rd person, the surroundings quieted down. Some people even had astonishment in their eyes. This was because the 3rd person was not Zhuowen, as everyone had expected. Instead, it was the 2nd on the divine list, Fu Yu. a direct disciple of the divine devil peak. Fuyu quietly floated in the void. He raised his head and looked at his ranking in the sky. When he saw the third place, his eyes narrowed. However, he did not say anything. Instead, he silently returned to the divine devil peak. Senior brother Fuyu. A young man came to Fuyu's side and said casually. Chapter 1376. Jianan rubbed his head and said in a slightly embarrassed manner, I've only entered the 6th level. I can't compare to senior brother at all. Fuyu revealed a look of admiration and said, You've only just started cultivating the 9 transformations of the demon and god, yet you've already entered the 6th level of the Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Hall. If you seriously cultivate the 9 transformations of the demon and god in the future, your strength will surpass mine sooner or later. Jianan chuckled and said in an even more embarrassed manner, Senior brother Fuyu, you're too kind. The gap between the two of us is huge. You're really exaggerating. Fuyu shook his head and didn't say anything. He was clearly aware of how terrifying the undying armor soul was. Perhaps Jianan didn't realize it himself, but Fuyu knew that if Jianan's cultivation improved, and he successfully cultivated the 9 transformations of the demon and god, it wouldn't be strange for him to surpass Fuyu with the undying armor soul. However, Fuyu didn't explain in detail. He was clearly aware that Jianan's cultivation wasn't high yet, so he hadn't sensed it yet. He would naturally understand it once his cultivation was high in the future. Only Yang Yi and Zhuowen are left in the Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Hall. Zhuowen is really not bad. He will probably get 2nd place this time. This ranking is really not bad for a new student. Fuyu muttered softly while his brows knit together slightly. He had naturally heard of Zhuowen, but he didn't pay much attention to him in the past. After all, Zhuowen was a new student that had just entered the inner court. No matter how strong he was, how strong could he be? But now, Fuyu realized that he had completely underestimated Zhuowen. This fellow had actually surpassed him in the Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Hall in the end. The only question was whether Zhuowen had caught up to Yang Yi. Of course, in Fuyu's heart, Zhuowen's chances of obtaining first was far lower than Yang Yi. This wasn't just Fuyu's thoughts. It was also the thoughts of everyone who was paying attention to this matter. Not necessarily. I feel that big brother Zhuowen also has a very high chance of obtaining first place. Jianan suddenly spoke, causing Fuyu to look at him with slight surprise. He said, Jianan, you know Zhuowen? Jianan grinned and said, I entered the inner court with big brother Zhuowen. We were both outer court disciples in the past. I see. Fuyu nodded, then asked with interest, And why are you so sure that Zhuowen has a high chance of getting first place? Intuition. Because big brother Zhuowen has never let me down. He has always been number 1. Even this time is no exception. Jianan laughed heartlessly. Fuyu was taken aback, his face filled with astonishment. Soon after he smiled and said, What a simple reason. However, first place is not up to you. Instead, it depends on whether Zhuowen has the ability to do so. Although the Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Palace does not necessarily depend on one's strength, Yang Yi can be considered a monster in every aspect. Of course, there is one aspect where he is barely passable, and that is that he is too lazy. Fuyu shook his head as he spoke. Clearly, he did not agree with Jianan's words. I believe in big brother Zhuowen, Jianan said in a rather stubborn manner. Fuyu was taken aback, but he did not say anything else. After spending some time together, he had become somewhat familiar with Jianan's character. This little fellow was extremely stubborn. If he was determined on something, even 10 horses would not be able to pull him back. Therefore, Fuyu did not get too entangled with Jianan on this topic. Instead, he silently waited for the appearance of the 2nd place. Time continued to flow. Countless disciples of the inner court waited with raised heads. Their gazes landed on the Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Palace. They were clearly aware that once the 2nd place appeared, the first place would naturally be known. Another month passed. On this day, the energy on the surface of the Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Palace began to churn violently. An enormous pillar of light appeared outside the ice and fire dual polarity palace. A figure was faintly discernible within the pillar of light. It appeared somewhat blurry. It's about to appear. Who will be the second place? The moment the pillar of light appeared, the atmosphere of the entire inner court became somewhat solemn. Numerous gazes stared intently at the figure that had appeared on the pillar of light. The light gradually faded away, revealing a lazy figure. Then, the surroundings became extremely quiet. Everyone stared at the lazy figure in a daze, unable to speak to themselves for a long time. Of course, after the silence, there was an uproar. This was because the person who had appeared was none other than the first place on the divine list, Yang Yi. The fellow who everyone thought would be the first place this time. Senior brother Yang Yi is actually only second place. In other words, Zhuowen from Aoyuan Peak is first place? The sound of discussion swept out like an avalanche. Everyone's eyes were filled with disbelief. In particular, the dozen core disciples from Aoyuan Peak cheered. Lu Qing's beautiful eyes stared excitedly at the ranking in the clouds. Zhuowen actually won first place in the end. This was really beyond the expectations of Aoyuan Peak. At the same time, it also made the dozen core disciples of Aoyuan Peak feel proud and elated. For many years, Aoyuan Peak had been ranked last among the 9 peaks of the inner court. Not only did it have few cultivation resources and low yuan qi concentration, but the peak master of Aoyuan Peak, Xiaoyu, also didn't care about anything. As a disciple of Aoyuan Peak, when walking in the inner court, he would often be looked at strangely by the disciples of other peaks. Many disciples of Aoyuan Peak had enough of such treatment. Now, Zhuowen had won the first place for their Aoyuan Peak. At this moment, their Aoyuan Peak was no longer the worst peak that everyone pointed at and talked about. Yang Yi naturally also noticed the surrounding gazes, but he didn't care too much. Instead, his gaze fell on the ranking in the clouds. When he saw that he was ranked second, he let out a low sigh. His heart was slightly complicated. Sigh, I'm really unlucky. What the hell is wrong with the Ice Flame Saint Talisman? It actually sealed the entrance to the 18th floor. Yang Yi touched his head with a slight headache. He knew that if it weren't for the Ice Flame Saint Talisman, the first place would have fallen into his hands. However, he also knew that it was useless to think about it now. The result was already doomed. Thinking of this, Yang Yi slowly landed on Sky Capital Peak. Senior brother, you're actually second. Did you go easy on him? Feng Nianlan immediately greeted him with a suspicious look. Jianmu also came to Yang Yi. Although he didn't speak, the suspicion in his eyes showed that he didn't believe that Yang Yi would lose to Zhuowen. Yang Yi yawned and pointed to the ranking in the clouds. In fact, I'm indeed second. This ranking won't lie. Yang Yi was too lazy to explain. After he finished speaking, he casually came to a stone pillar in the square and lazily leaned against it. His face was filled with calmness, without any sense of defeat. Junior sister Chen Shui, your lover is pretty good. I now know that you won't be at a disadvantage if you follow that brat. Yang Yi suddenly gave a thumbs up to Mu Chenxue. Mu Chenxue was taken aback. Soon after, a brilliant smile appeared on the corner of her mouth. Her beautiful eyes fell on the ice and fire dual extreme palace, as a trace of pride emerged in her heart. Zhuowen was Mu Chenxue's lover. This news had already spread in the inner court. Because of this, there were many people who slandered Zhuowen, believing that Zhuowen wasn't worthy of Mu Chenxue. However, from today onwards, those people who slandered him would obediently shut their mouths. Zhuowen had suppressed Yang Yi and Fu Yu in the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Palace, becoming the number 1 person this time. Who would dare to say that Zhuowen wasn't worthy of Mu Chenxue? On the Divine Devil Peak, Fu Yu was completely stunned. He licked his somewhat dry lips and softly said, "It can't be. Yang Yi is actually second and Zhuowen is first? Haha. I knew that big brother Zhuowen would definitely be first. My intuition is as accurate as ever." Jianan, who was beside Fu Yu, tightly clenched his fists. His face was flushed red as he laughed out loud. However, this laughter was rather ear-piercing when it reached Fu Yu's ears, and the corners of his eyes involuntarily twitched. Obviously, he felt a little annoyed by Jianan's baseless guess. However, it just so happened that Jia Nan had guessed correctly. Therefore, the current feeling in Fu Yu's heart was as if he had eaten a bitter gourd. He felt extremely helpless. Zhuowen is first. Wushang, Zhuowen is actually first. On the Taishan Peak, Qingyin couldn't help but exclaim out loud. Moyan Wushang, who was standing beside Qingyin, was stunned at first. He immediately revealed a sweet smile, but there was a tinge of bitterness in his smile. It seems that the two of you know Zhuowen. This time, Aoyuan Peak has really taken in a good disciple. He actually managed to obtain first place in the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Palace. Yuan Wanha, who was standing in front of the two girls, revealed a tinge of surprise in her eyes. However, it was quickly replaced by a smile. Brother Zhua is still as powerful and terrifying as ever. He actually obtained first place. This is really... On the Hidden Sword Peak, Emo Lingtian stared blankly at the final result. Then, the corners of his mouth were filled with a bitter smile. Talent is innate, but hard work can make up for it. Suddenly, a cold voice came from behind Emo Lingtian. Emo Lingtian turned his head and immediately saw Su Lingping, who had a small sword on her waist, looking at him indifferently. Senior Su, you are right. Hard work can make up for it. Emo Lingtian bowed respectfully. Su Lingping was the strongest pro-disciple of the Hidden Sword Peak. This time she was ranked 5th. She was an existence that Emo Lingtian looked up to. He had to treat her with caution. Take it. This is the complete version of the Heaven Burial Sword scripture. Everything must be done step by step. Don't belittle yourself. Don't bite off more than you can chew. Don't let external things affect your heart. Otherwise, you won't be able to go far on the road of martial arts. After saying this, Su Lingping elegantly turned around, leaving Emo Lingtian with a rather proud and aloof back view. Emo Lingtian was stunned. Su Lingping, who usually didn't talk much, had said so much to him today. This made Emo Lingtian feel a little flattered. He couldn't help but whisper, "It's rare for Senior Su to say so much. I must live up to her expectations." Chapter 1377. Lockdown. The top 10 rankings had already been revealed, but none of the countless disciples in the inner court left. Their gazes were fixed on the Ice and Fire Polarity Palace. This was because there was still one person who had yet to emerge from the Ice and Fire Polarity Palace, and that was Zhuowen, who was ranked first this time. Although Zhuowen's reputation in the inner court had been quite strong for a long time, only the disciples of Sky Capital Peak and Mysterious Yuan Peak had seen Zhuowen's true appearance. The disciples of the other main peaks had never seen Zhuowen's true appearance. There were many disciples who were looking forward to seeing the number 1 of the Ice and Fire Dual Extremes Palace this time around. Among them, there were many female disciples whose eyes were shining brightly, as though they were hungry wolves. However, after Yang Yi emerged, Zhuowen did not appear as everyone had expected. The Ice and Fire Polarity Palace was still very quiet. Time continued to pass. 1 month, 2 months, after 3 months, there was still no movement from the Ice and Fire Polarity Palace. Some people in the inner court began to get impatient. Although martialists who had stepped onto the path of martial arts were extremely patient, waiting for 3 months was still quite unbearable. What's going on? Why hasn't Zhuowen come out yet? Could something have happened inside? Many disciples in the inner court began to discuss spiritedly. They were guessing what had happened to Zhuowen inside. On Sky Capital Peak, Mu Qinxue was waiting. She raised her head slightly and stared at the Ice and Fire Polarity Palace. Her beautiful eyebrows were tightly knitted together, and a trace of worry appeared in her heart. 3 months had passed, and Zhuowen still had not come out. This was very strange in itself. It could not help but make Mu Qinxue worried and even afraid. She was afraid that something had happened to Zhuowen. Eldest senior brother, do you know which level Zhuowen entered the Ice and Fire Polarity Palace? In the end, Mu Qinxue walked towards Yang Yi, who was lazily leaning against a stone pillar, and asked while biting her lower lip. Yang Yi narrowed his eyes and said, "I entered the 17th floor. Zhuowen, that brat, entered the 18th floor. Don't ask me why. In fact, I don't know what happened to that brat on the 18th floor." The 18th floor? Eldest senior brother, You're not making this up, right? Only 3 martial granduncles have entered the 18th level before, right? Although the violent energy of the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Palace has weakened a lot this time, it should be very difficult for anyone who hasn't entered the Saint stage to enter, right? Feng Nianlan said in disbelief. Even Jian Mu, who was standing by the side with an emotionless expression, revealed a rare expression of shock. Zhuowen had actually reached the final level of the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Hall. This was a little too frightening. The 18th floor? Mu Qinshua's expression changed. Wasn't the 18th floor where the Ice-Fire holy symbol was? The ice and fire energy in that place was the most terrifying. Zhuowen would most likely be in danger if he entered. What should we do? Mu Qinshuo was a little flustered. Her tender body trembled. She was afraid that something would happen to Zhuowen. Junior sister Qinshuo, Zhuowen is very lucky. Nothing will happen to him. Perhaps because he noticed Mu Qinshuo's strange state, Jian Mu suddenly spoke to comfort her. Boom, boom, boom. Suddenly, a terrifying explosion sounded around the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Hall. Then, everyone in the inner court was stunned to find that the ice and fire energy around the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Hall began to become violent. In the end, it was like a monstrous tsunami, raging in the void. The energy of the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Hall has recovered and become violent again. Many of the Inner Academy's disciples revealed stunned expressions when they saw this scene. Soon after they reacted. Every once in a while the violent energy on the surface of the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Hall would weaken to the lowest point. However, this situation wouldn't last forever. This weakening of the energy could only last for half a year. Once half a year was up, the energy of the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Hall would once again regain its violent state. Previously, the other disciples had spent over 3 months to come out. In addition to the 3 months that everyone had spent waiting for Zhuowen, it was exactly half a year. The violent energy of the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Hall had finally recovered. Zhuowen still hasn't come out? Seeing this scene, many disciples of the inner court were stunned. Originally, the reason why they were waiting here was because of Zhuowen. Now that the energy on the surface of the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Hall had once again regained its violent state, Zhuowen still hadn't come out. Could it be that something had happened? Boom, boom, boom. Just as everyone was guessing, the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Hall began to tremble intensely. The violent ice and fire energy on its surface was like a swimming dragon, continuously swimming and circulating on its surface. It was an extremely frightening sight. The 9 thick chains that were originally fixed to the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Hall continued to tremble within the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Hall. The originally pitch-black surface of the chains was covered with red and blue colors. This was caused by the ice and fire energy. Bang! 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 The trembling of the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Hall was extremely intense. In fact, it even affected the entire inner court. The 9 main peaks that reached into the clouds began to tremble continuously. Countless rocks fell from the peaks, smashing into the bottom of the 9 peaks. This also caused quite a commotion. Many official and nominal disciples at the bottom of the 9 peaks lost their heads out of fear as they resisted the countless rocks that fell from the top of the 9 peaks. The disciples on the 9 peaks were in an even more miserable state than the disciples at the bottom of the 9 peaks. The entire mountain was trembling. Many core disciples directly lay on the ground, not daring to stand up. After all, the trembling that permeated the 9 peaks was far too intense. It was as if the 9 peaks were about to collapse because of this. Only a small number of stronger disciples stood where they were, as if their feet were rooted to the ground. However, their expressions were quite ugly. At this moment, the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Hall appeared especially strange. Normally speaking, after the violent energy on the surface of the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Hall had recovered, it should have calmed down as usual. However, the entire Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Hall was currently going berserk. It was as if there was a wild and uneasy heart within the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Hall that was continuously beating, disrupting the rhythm of the entire Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Hall. Swoosh swoosh swoosh. 12 figures rushed out from the clouds, while the hearts of the many Inner Academy disciples were pounding. The one leading them was the headmaster of the Inner Academy, Yanji. It is the 3 martial granduncles, and the 9 peak masters. They should have a way to deal with this ice and fire dual extreme hall that has suddenly become berserk. Many Inner Academy disciples revealed hopeful expressions when the 12 people appeared. The ice and fire dual extreme hall was currently too frightening. If they did not stop it, it was very difficult for them to imagine whether the Inner Academy would be destroyed because of it. Martial Uncle Yanji, we must immediately seal the ice and fire dual extreme hall. Otherwise, the ice and fire energy that is being emitted will have an extremely frightening effect on the Inner Academy. Among the 12 people, Xianzhong suddenly opened his mouth and spoke. Xiao Yu's expression changed slightly. He hurriedly said, "This cannot be done. Zhuan is still inside. How can we seal the ice and fire dual extreme hall now? If we seal it, how will Zhuan come out?" Xianzhong spoke in a decisive manner. "Xiao Yu, you are being selfish and ignoring the big picture. If this ice and fire energy is not contained, it is likely that the 9 peaks of the Inner Academy will be destroyed. How can we ignore the safety of the Inner Academy because of a Zhuan?" "Bullshit!" Xiao Yu cried out furiously. He immediately spoke to Yanji. "Martial Granduncle Yanji, let's wait a little longer. Zhuan might be about to come out. If we seal it now, it is likely that Zhuan will not be able to come out." "Martial Granduncle, you should not listen to Xiao Yu's nonsense. Zhuan has not come out after such a long time. It is likely that he has died inside. There is no need for us to ignore the safety of the Inner Academy because of a dead person." Xianzhong spoke in a righteous manner. His appearance made Xiao Yu feel like giving him a punch. Yanji's eyes flickered as he said, "All right, the 2 of you should stop arguing. Let's wait for another hour." After an hour has passed, I can feel that the ice and fire energy on the surface of the ice and fire dual extreme hall will likely erupt. We must seal it before that happens. "Thank you, Martial Granduncle Yanji." Xiao Yu's eyes brightened as he hurriedly expressed his gratitude. As for Xianzhong, he frowned slightly. His expression was somewhat ugly. His gaze landed on the ice and fire dual extreme hall as his eyes flickered. No one knew what he was thinking. Why haven't the 3 martial granduncles sealed the ice and fire dual extreme hall? This ice and fire energy is too wild and violent. Even I can't endure it. I'm afraid that they are waiting for Zhuan to appear. However, when will this wait end? Perhaps Zhuan has already died inside. Waiting like this will only make us suffer. Many disciples of the 9 peaks began to complain. The wild and violent ice and fire energy was very frightening. If one's strength was insufficient, it was very easy for one's meridians to be shattered by the ice and fire energy. At that time, one would become a cripple. On Capital Sky Peak, Mu Qinshua's delicate hands were tightly clenched. Her palms were filled with sparkling sweat. Her beautiful eyes were filled with worry as she softly muttered, "Zhuan, nothing must happen to you." Time passed second by second. Finally, an hour had passed. The ice and fire energy on the surface of the ice and fire dual extreme hall had reached an extremely frightening level. Under this might, the entire Inner Academy shook violently. Some casualties had even begun to appear. "Martial Granduncle, Zhuan has yet to appear. I'm afraid that he has died inside. Hurry up and seal it." Xianzhong opened his mouth once again. Xiao Yu wanted to refute, but he realized that there was no other reason to refute Xianzhong. An hour was the limit that Yanji could give. The current ice and fire energy was too frightening. It had already caused a certain number of casualties in the Inner Academy. They could not delay any longer. Yanji glanced at Xiao Yu and sighed softly. "Yanji, we can only look at the bigger picture." With that, Yanji waved his hand and stepped into the air with Jiang Xian and Wenbai. They stood around the ice and fire dual extreme hall. The martial granduncles have taken action. It looks like they plan to seal the ice and fire dual extreme hall. We're saved now. Many cultivators sighed gently when they saw Yanji and the other 2's actions. They knew that the 3 saints could easily seal the ice and fire dual extreme hall. Chapter 1378. Like a moth to a flame, Xiao Yu opened his mouth as he watched the door of the Ice and Fire Polar Hall gradually close. In the end, he did not say a single word. He knew that if the door of the Ice and Fire Polar Hall was not closed, the ice and fire energy surrounding the hall would become extremely terrifying. At that time, it would probably cause irreparable damage to the inner court. Zhuowen, I've let you down. Xiao Yu clenched his fists as he muttered in a low voice with a guilty expression. At this moment, Xiao Yu felt as if he had fallen from heaven to hell. Just a moment ago, he was extremely excited because Zhuowen had obtained first place, but now, he was extremely dejected because Zhuowen was unable to come out of the Ice and Fire Duel Extreme Hall. Xiao Yu, don't worry. Once the violent energy of the Ice and Fire Polar Hall calms down, I will personally enter the 18th floor. At that time, if Zhuowen is still alive, I will bring him out. Just as Xiao Yu was frowning, Yan Ji's voice suddenly rang out in his head, causing him to immediately calm down. Thank you, teacher Uncle Yan Ji. Xiao Yu replied. Actually, he wanted Yan Ji to enter the Ice and Fire Polar Hall right now. But he also knew that the ice and fire energy on the surface of the Ice and Fire Polar Hall was just too violent. Perhaps Yan Ji could enter the first few floors without any problems. However, the ice and fire energy on the last floor of the Ice and Fire Polar Hall was so violent that even Yan Ji would find it difficult to resist it. If it was any other time, it would be rather easy for Yan Ji to enter the 18th floor. However, the violent energy on the surface of the Ice and Fire Polar Hall was far more violent than usual. Even Yan Ji would find it difficult to enter the 18th floor of the Ice and Fire Polar Hall. Moreover, if he did not seal off the Ice and Fire Polar Hall, the ice and fire energy on the surface would become very violent. At that time, it would definitely cause heavy casualties to the inner court. This was also why Yan Ji planned to enter the 18th floor after sealing off the Ice and Fire Polar Hall. Swish! When the door of the Ice and Fire Polar Hall was about to close, the sound of something rushing through the air rang out. Afterwards, a beautiful figure shot through the air under everyone's shocked gazes, heading towards the door that was about to close. Chen Shui. Old man Tiandu's eyes were sharp. He immediately saw the beautiful figure flying out, and could not help but roar in anger. He took a step forward and chased after the beautiful figure. Junior sister Chen Shui. The moment old man Tiandu rushed out, Jianmu suddenly took out the long sword on his back and stepped on it. With a whoosh, he quickly chased after Mu Chenxue. It's Mu Chenxue. What does she want? Are you courting death by approaching the Ice and Fire Duel Extremes Palace at this time? The countless inner court disciples who were originally paying attention to the changes in the Ice and Fire halls revealed surprise and bewilderment in their eyes. They had never expected that Mu Chenxue would actually rush towards the Ice and Fire halls at this moment. Right now, the energy in the Dual Polarity Palace was extremely violent. Mu Chenxue's cultivation was only at the 7th level of the Great Emperor realm. Entering the palace with such a cultivation level was no different from courting death. Chen Shui, come back. Old man Tiandu roared angrily. His speed soared to the extreme, and he instantly rushed behind Mu Chenxue. He reached out a hand to grab her. Master, don't stop me. I must go in. I want to see Zhuowen. Mu Chenxue raised her jade-like hand, and the Xianming orb appeared in her hand. The terrifying Xianming Law turned into a giant black python and rushed out, attacking Old Man Tiandu. Old Man Tiandu's face was a little ugly. He punched out and countless green vines rushed out, full of vitality. The law that this old man had mastered was the law of wood, which had surging vitality and recovery ability. Boom! 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 The law of wood and the Xianming Law collided, and a terrifying explosion rang out. Old man Tiandu frowned, and his charging footsteps stopped. Chen Shui, don't do anything stupid. The energy in the Ice and Fire Duel Extremes Palace is too violent. You're courting death if you go in. I'm afraid that Zhuowen is already dead inside. There's no need for you to go in and be buried with him. Jianmu stood on his flying sword and roared out. Mu Chenxue shook her head. With a wave of her jade-like hand, a jade talisman appeared in her palm. She crushed it and a surge of energy rushed out, surrounding her body. Her speed soared to the extreme. Whoosh! In an instant, Mu Qinxue turned into a stream of light and disappeared before everyone's eyes. In the next moment, Mu Qinxue had already landed at the entrance of the Ice and Fire Dual Extremes Palace. At this moment there was only a gap left at the entrance. In just a few breaths of time, the door would be completely closed. Don't! Jianmu roared. The flying sword under his feet exploded with blazing light. At this moment, his speed increased by several times. He was even faster than Old Man Tian, due in just a breath of time. He had already closed in on the Ice and Fire Dual Extremes Palace. Zhuowen won't die. Even if he dies, I plan to be buried with him and stay by his side. After Mu Qinxue firmly said these words, she revealed a sweet smile. At this moment, Mu Qinshua's smile had a special charm that attracted the gazes of countless people in the inner court. After saying this, Mu Qinxue took a step forward. The instant the door closed, she disappeared from everyone's sight. Just like this, Mu Qinxue entered the Ice and Fire Dual Extremes Palace alone. At this moment, the 9 main peaks of the inner court fell into a strange silence. Everyone stood in a daze as they stared at the still closed door of the Ice and Fire Dual Extremes Palace. At this moment, everyone seemed to have a tacit understanding. They didn't say anything, and their actions were strangely uniform. They raised their heads and looked at the door in a daze. In their minds, the resolute figure of Mu Qinxue stepping into the Ice and Fire Dual Extremes Palace echoed for a long time. In their ears, Mu Qinshue's final words were like a demon's voice that continuously resounded. Elder sister Qinxue can actually do this for Zhuowen. On the Taixian Peak, Moyan Wuxiang's body turned cold. Her beautiful eyes were filled with sadness and sadness. She finally knew why Zhuowen would fall in love with Mu Qinxue, and even adopt an indifferent attitude towards other girls. It turned out that Mu Qinshue's feelings for Zhuowen were so deep. She had given up so much for him, and was even willing to give up her life in the end. Towards such a woman who cared about her feelings, Zhuowen would not allow himself to do anything that would let her down. So after coming in contact with Mu Qinxue, Zhuowen treated other girls with indifference. Even for Moyan Wuxiang, Zhuowen had never stepped over the final hurdle. Perhaps Zhuowen did have a good impression of Moyan Wuxiang, but he would never do anything intimate with her. I can't do what elder sister Qinxue can do for Zhuowen. Moyan Wuxiang revealed a sad smile. At this moment, she suddenly found that she was a bit useless. She couldn't be like Mu Qinxue who gave up everything for Zhuowen, even if it was her life. She couldn't be like Mu Qinxue who had great talent and strength to help Zhuowen solve problems within her power. She could only look at Zhuowen or talk to him, but she didn't do anything. It's not without reason that Zhuowen loves elder sister Qinxue. I can't be compared to elder sister Qinxue. Moyan Wuxiang squatted on the ground and tears flowed out of the corners of her eyes. Qingyin, who was standing beside Moyan Wuxiang, didn't say anything. She just stood there silently, and her eyes were also filled with sighs. On the Divine Devil Peak, Fuyu sighed and said, "For that Zhuowen, Mu Qinxue is willing to enter the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Hall. Is it really worth it? This kind of sacrifice is just too stupid." "Senior brother Fuyu, you're wrong." Beside him, Jianan suddenly said in a deep voice. At this moment, Jianan's face didn't look good, and was even a little pale. Fuyu was stunned. He looked deeply at Jianan and said, "Why do you say that? The ice and fire energy in the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Hall is too violent. Zhuowen is most likely dead inside. It's not worth it to sacrifice your life for someone who's about to die." Jianan shook her head and said, "Maybe you don't think it's worth it, but elder sister Qinxue thinks it's worth it. Because elder sister Qinxue loves big brother Zhuowen deeply." In the vast heavenly armor continent, it's rare to meet the person you're destined to meet. It's even rarer to know each other in love. Since you've met each other, it's worth it to sacrifice everything you can for each other. If elder brother Zhuowen encountered this kind of situation, he would do the same thing. Whether it's worth it or not depends on different people. Fuyu was stunned. He didn't expect that the usually carefree Jianan would become so deep at this moment. It was as if this kid had become a completely different person. Whoosh whoosh. Jianmu and Old Man Tiandu also came to the door of the Ice and Fire Duel Extreme Hall. However, the door was tightly shut, and the two of them couldn't enter. Open for me. Jianmu's eyes were scarlet red. He clenched his right hand and slashed out with his long sword. A terrifying sword light turned into a crescent moon and heavily smashed the door of the Ice and Fire Duel Extreme Hall. Rumble, rumble, rumble. The sword light only caused the door to sway a little before it completely disappeared. Open for me. Jianmu was almost crazy. He slashed out again and again. Dense sword light filled the entire space, looking extremely terrifying. However, the sword light didn't have much of an effect. After slamming into the door, it completely disappeared. Although the sword light didn't have any effect, Jianmu didn't care. He was like a madman, constantly slashing out with the long sword in his hand. Jianmu, stop. With your current strength, it's impossible for you to break open the door. Old Man Tiandu shouted from behind Jianmu. However, Old Man Tiandu's words didn't have any effect. Jianmu was almost crazy and didn't care about Old Man Tiandu's words at all. Stop. Old Man Tiandu shouted. The law of wood gushed out from his palm. Suddenly, green vines shot out like pythons and wrapped around Jianmu's body, causing him to completely stop. Master, let me go. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.